Yo, 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 to everybody who's been waiting, thank you for waiting patiently. This is my second live stream, Ichabod live coming at you. I got a few guests waiting backstage, but just wanted to give you guys a chance to get in, say what's up in the chat. If you're rocking with us, throw a hey, throw a what's up in the chat so we can just kind of see that we're live and direct. We got some heads with us here. Appreciate you guys tuning in, taking time out of your schedule. If you have not subscribed yet, please go subscribe. Maybe even hit that like so we can get some interaction going there as well. Got a great discussion for you tonight. Cannot wait to get into it. Got some great guys who are going to, my man Dave, what's happening? Got some great guys who are going to be tuning or chiming in to this discussion. Shane Almgren, who was with us on my first live, X Universal X. Good to see you. Thanks for coming through. And James Pesch. I got to figure out how to say his last name. Pesch. I'll ask him. I did an interview on his channel a few weeks ago, and both of these guys, when I was talking to them, they had some insights on how they saw Christian worship and the Christian service as almost being something that could lay the groundwork for people becoming very suggestible or suggestive. And we started talking about how that plays into worship music and the Christian church service. And before I knew it, I said, man, these guys, they hadn't met each other yet, but they both had something that made me say, if I wrote this into a group conversation, I think it would be a great one. So, hey, Miss Candy, Mr. Terrell. All right. I'm glad you're enjoying the book. I'm about to bring these brothers in, and we are going to have at it. So please welcome to the live Shane Almgren and James.
Howdy. Good to be here.
James, pronounce your last name for us.
It's Pesch. I know. It looks weird.
Okay.
I know.
Pesch. All right. That's
Yes,
what's up. So James, you have a YouTube channel.
Yes, sir.
What's your channel?
I mean, it's just me. It's just James Pesch.
James Pesch.
Okay,
Okay,
I think there's like my middle initial P is in there. So if you're looking for me on YouTube, I think it's James P. Pesch.
Okay. I got a feeling that by the end of the night, they'll want to go see more of what you do on your channel. What do you do on your channel real quick? Just give us a quick little.
Right. The Gambit is pretty extensive. I primarily have focused on linguistics, hypnosis, and its relationship in sales, personal development, self-help, things of that area. In recent years, I've shifted more into mental health and the ethics of how neurolinguistics can affect our behavior and our insight, and how ethically people who are understand hypnosis and things like that should seek consent first and constantly check for that ethically.
And real quick, just to be ethical, what is your background in being able to even speak about all that?
No, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So I am a certified neurolinguistic practitioner that carries very little weight with me because it's one of those things that can be dismissed in fields as easily as it can be accepted. It's not something official. I actually believe that my real experience in this was through the charismatic church and the Pentecostal movement, and witnessing things like faith healing, doing that, practicing that myself, and then seeing the crossover years later when I was actually, whenever I saw Trump doing what he was doing initially, and the methods and tools that he was using linguistically, my ears came up and I was just like, man, are people really not seeing this? Is it really something these little tricks and these little linguistic tools, are these things that people don't readily recognize and notice. I
Wow.
mean, and that's whenever I kind of started focusing more on that area and wondered if educating people is something that people would even be interested in like, this is how these things work. These
Okay.
inductions, these hypnotic, linguistic tools, this is how they work. And if you haven't given consent,
Wow.
you and you don't know, that's what really started to bother me.
Okay.
Is
So we're going to come back to a
you're
lot of
not
that.
aware of these tools and these tricks,
Right.
and you never gave consent.
Ooh.
and so that's the difference between like magicians and hypnotists and mentalists, is
Mhm.
that they usually come up and say, hey, would you like to see a trick,
Gotcha.
or can I ask you a question? These are all little ways of asking for consent, right? Well, Trump didn't do that. No, nobody asked us to just get with that on our
Okay.
face.
All right. Let's
Like, it just
let's
got
pause that
dumped
right there.
in your
Let's-
mouth, in your face.
Let's pause that right there. We'll come back to that in a minute.
I
As
apologize.
soon
That
as
was
he
probably-
mentioned, no, you're good. You're good. That's a great intro. As soon as he mentioned Trump, Shane, you chuckled a little bit. You've got connections with Trump before you started seeing, and this is not going to be a Trump bashing show. This is not going to be a show about Trump.
No.
But
I was shocked my parents didn't see it.
Yeah. But Shane, before you saw Trump run for president and the way he took hold of a certain part of the population, did you look at him as someone that had that kind of, what James is talking about, ability to sort of suck people into a flow of thought to the point where they almost are mindlessly following? Had you seen that when you worked for Trump or any time prior?
Well, first off, I'm not going to answer any questions until I get that sound effects from James one more time. How did he come at us?
Oh,
It was very.
There we go. There. All right. Now I'll answer anything you got to ask.
Okay.
Yes, he's an incredibly charismatic person. It's when you're in a room, when you're in a group of people, the people that, I mean, we talk about like a magnetic personality, people that you're just drawn to. There's nothing off-putting until you actually start to listen to some of the content of what's coming out of his mouth, because there was no filter. It was misogynistic or racist, sexist, whatever, foul mouth, but extraordinarily charismatic. Like, he'd be the one in the cafeteria that everybody wanted to sit at his table. Now, you didn't believe a single word that came out of his mouth, but you sure wanted to be there to hear it.
Yeah, it's just fun.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. I don't think people factor into, so they say they put attractive people on the news because you're more prone to trust people that you find attractive. And I don't think people factor in how much someone's attractiveness, them being well-spoken, them being charismatic, or them being confident, how much that plays into our willingness to hear what they have to say.
Sure. And back, I was nearly going on 23 years ago since I've worked for him. There's obviously, kind of the same way we see with Biden, where the speech is not the same as it was. If you look back at 2008, 12, when he was Obama's VP, his speaking cadence, his tone, they both dropped a few registers or a few tones. They both slowed down a bit. They both kind of stammer. But if you go back and watch some of his old interviews, whether it was with Oprah or Good Morning America, whatever, he was a much more fluid and polished speaker. And I mean, the way he spoke, there wasn't kind of any of the unhinged ranting that sort of derails stuff. I mean, he sounded like, to your point, he sounded like a person. He spoke with authority and command. And because he was charismatic on top, you'd perk up and listen.
Right. If there really was a historical Jesus, think about some of the things that even the gospel writers say people said about him. Never a man spoke like this. There's something about having, like you said, that magnetic personality, that ability to speak. And if people are just automatically drawn to just want to hear what you have to say, maybe you've got a voice, maybe you've got a talent that draws people in. So we're gonna be pulling on those threads throughout the conversation. But what made me want to draw you two together for this combo was you both hit on in our individual conversations, I think me and you, Shane, we talked about this before we turned the camera on. And then James, we said it actually while we were recording. We talked about the way the Christian experience and the church service sort of opens people up to being susceptible to, we didn't use the word mind control. I don't even know if we used the word manipulation, but just there's something where you're not really thinking for yourself anymore because you're kind of caught up in the flow of what's happening. And so we're going to talk about that, the church service. We're going to talk about the praise and worship part of it, because that, I think that's the most that's the most
on
prime,
the ushering in of the Holy Spirit,
where you drop
and the
your guard.
presence
So
of God and those
we have
emotions and all
spiritual
that.
terms for it. We don't say you drop your guard. We don't say you become susceptible. We don't say that. We say things like you're being ushered into
Usher in the presence.
of God.
Inviting in the presence. All
Yeah.
that.
So you set the mood for worship and all that kind of stuff.
The presence is like a vampire. You got to invite him in.
You quiet your heart.
It's always quiet your mind. There and super powerful, but it's not until you really notice it and invite it in. That's when it touches you.
The presence of an all-powerful God.
Yeah.
You don't sense that presence until you do something to trigger it. It almost makes you wonder, like, wait, who's got the power again?
That, yeah, when you put it like that.
Yeah,
but then
emotional
and now you have
so
many naysayers saying, "No, I feel him all the time in that capacity."
Yeah, we're going to talk about all that. But before we go in, I just want to ask each of you, what was your experience? I want you to go back. I'm not trying to hypnotize you when I say this, but I want you to go back, into your earliest memory, your earliest memory of a Christian praise and worship service. What do you remember? How did you experience it? What was it like for you? What was the lasting impacts of it? James, you can kick it off.
Oh, thank you. I was actually curious to hear Shane. So I am neurodivergent, which is like in the mental health care field and things like that would be considered on the scale of like autism and things like that. So I have attributed some of my lack of the fullness of this experience to potentially that I'm just somehow incapable. I remember at an early age witnessing how powerful the music was and noticing when it affected the crowd. But I personally, even as much as I wanted to feel it, the way that I noticed everyone else feeling it, I personally never could get it from what we call praise and worship.
Okay.
Or even music in general. Concepts do it to me. Like when I get too into concepts, I can find that transcendence, that wow, like this elation. But when it came to the praise and worship experience, I noticed it, I saw it, I witnessed it. I could see the waves, I could see the ebb and flow of it, but I never experienced it here. I didn't. I tried. I wanted it.
Wow. So let me ask you this then. Yeah. Let me ask you this. As you saw other people experiencing it, the power, the impact of the music on them, what did you think was going on?
At the time, I mean, I genuinely believed that they were just having an experience with the living God. And this was something that it was common and
okay,
just that was it. That's what I thought. It wasn't until years and years later that I connected the dots that this is an experience that's common to humans and can be elicited through multiple different avenues, or
Okay.
however you want to
Stick
put that.
stick a pin
But
there.
I
Yeah.
just use hypnosis and was able to elicit the same emotions later.
Got you. All right. Yeah. We'll get to that point.
Seemingly, I can do
Yeah.
that with hypnosis.
Yep. We'll get to that point. Shane, for you, your
Sorry.
earliest experience with praise and worship.
Yeah, that's real easy. So my parents went and enrolled at Christ for the Nations Institute in Dallas.
Hmm.
It's not seminary; it's more Bible school, prepping people to go out and evangelize. And worship was a huge part. I don't remember if they did it every day or if it was a few times a week, but it was the full charismatic experience. And I told James last night, that's when I was learning to walk. I mean, I learned to walk with a tambourine in my hand, and there's people in the aisles, waving flags and dancing. And so I would just run up and down the aisle, shaking my tambourine. Because like for me, music just scratched an itch in my soul, in my brain, whatever. I have to have, I've got to be hearing things. And just the whole experience. It wasn't just the sound, it was the camaraderie, it was the hoopla of it. That was, when I was 2-3 years old, that was my favorite thing to do. When's church? Because that's what I love for, is let's go get in the crowd, let's hear the music, let's feel it, because they were doing worship with drum sets, which was kind of new at the time still. So that was my earliest memory introduction to it.
And at that early age or stage, did you connect it to God or just the place of church?
That was the only place that we got the experience. At 2, my parents were not letting me club yet. I had 19 years to wait before they let me go clubbing. So that was the closest I could get to a club experience. And also, they're the ones telling me what the experience is. So that is my entire frame of reference. So at the same time, on Christmas morning when I get up and there are presents under the tree and they're going, Santa brought these. I don't know anything else, and that's what they're telling me. And then the same thing when we get in this worship atmosphere and they're going, the Spirit brought this presents, whatever presents, unintended pun there. Who brought these presents? I just believed that it was exactly what they told me it was.
What they said. Yeah. I think about my early experiences, having been raised in church from about the age of maybe 11 or 12. But even before then, I remember my mother playing gospel music around the house. And I never connected the music to anything in heaven or to God. I just liked the vibe that the music gave. It was very cultural, very soulful. But then I do remember going to church and starting to sing praise and worship songs. And every so often, maybe James, maybe you could speak to this. I liked the music, but every so often the concepts in the music, something would get past my radar. And I would find myself later that evening laying in bed, not just rehearsing the tune, but also the concept that we were singing about. And before I became a word of God, I just remember thinking about there's something grand, something transcendent. And I don't know if I would have got transcendence from the music alone. I think the words added a transcendence to it all. But I guess for you, James, if the music didn't do it for you, but concepts do, or concepts did even, do you remember as a child even thinking about the concepts and it kind of coming through, kind of getting beneath the surface? And what was that like for you?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think the things that needled at me, and the things that really, as a child, that really got me to feel like I was really in it, were the it was the power of it, right? Like my dad was super confident about the power of the Holy Spirit and what could be accomplished through the power of God and what could be done. And I think it was that concept that drove me into it, into the introspection of it all, was what could we possibly do? Could we really set everyone free? Can we really make everyone happy, and this utopia of love, and is it possible with this modality? And I think it was that overwhelming confidence that my father had. That idea alone is what really drove me into it hard and buy it fully. And I think over and over again, I think that's what kept pulling me back until I had to finally let go of the fact that, oh, I don't actually believe that can work, because I don't believe any of it anymore. That was kind of a final domino falling, maybe later, years later. Yeah.
All right. Next question for Shane. James, I have to ask that since your experience with worship music is different, I have to ask the question a little different for you, but I'm going to ask it to Shane first. After you deconverted, you grew up in the church, you grew up not just in the church, but believing this. You were a missionary on the mission field, preaching this. You were leading worship. You were a Christian musician going around the world playing Christian music for crowds. Then you deconvert. I have my own answer to this question, but I'm curious to hear yours. Is there any lasting impact of the worship experience, the Christian music, and how you were trained to experience it? Is there any lasting impact on your psyche, even though you've deconverted now for 2 decades?
The one thing that I still have fond memories of is like when you're doing secular music, when you do a concert or something, there's a separation between the performers and the people that are there to watch the show. So even though they might be singing along, to whatever the band is performing, there's still a separation. And when you do the worship thing, there's like a joining of the two. You're actively participating with them.
Yeah.
And that creates a weird energy that, I played for much larger crowds doing rock, country, whatever, pop stuff like that are, screaming. And that's cool, but it's not quite as cool as the effect of like the active synergistic participation there.
That we're feeding off of one another.
Yeah, exactly.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a weird back and forth. The worship leaders almost need it as much from the audience as the audience needs it from them. Whereas what I've found in my friends who are professional musicians, they don't really need that. They don't get the same. They want the energy, they want the hype, they want it, but they don't need you to feel what they're wanting you to feel as much deep. As just, are you having a good time? Like that's really all that matters. But in worship, you need it. You have to feel what they're feeling, and it's like this very strange relationship that
because if they're not ushering you into the presence of God, they're not doing their job.
Correct.
There's a failure there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Come and go with me to the house of the Lord. It's lift your hands with me. Yeah. But that synergy, I've taken the stage thousands of times as a rapper, and I got to think about that. That's very interesting, because as a rapper, we're not asking people to sing along with us, even though some people do know every word they're singing along. But I do think as a Christian performer, there was something that I was doing on stage that I wanted the audience to be very much a part of, to have the same experience. As opposed to if I was just a secular rapper, I may not have cared whether or not you got where I was coming from. So, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's something very interesting about the experience that the Christian musician is trying to usher the crowd into, for better or for worse.
And then the illusion breaks when you watch them rehearse, not the worship leaders, but the Christian artist, and you between takes, and you find out that so much of what you thought was leading up the Holy Spirit was completely scripted, and they will cut the bass player out if he goes off script.
Well, I've seen some church bands get into it over what they're not supposed to be doing during this part of the song, but the congregation would never know it was that tense behind the scene.
Well, do you guys remember the Christian artist Carmen?
Yes.
All right, so Carmen,
low key, there's a lot of history we need to talk about there, bro.
So Carmen,
one dude I shook hands with for sure.
He would always do the free concerts, and our youth group would always go. In Pittsburgh, we'd always go down to Three Rivers Arena, whatever it was called at the time, and he kind of operated a concert like a worship service where, you do a song and, oh, thank Jesus. You guys put your hands up, close your eyes. And there's this like kind of being led by the Spirit, sort of free flowing interaction. And it was just a couple years into me being in Nashville. It was back in like 2002 or 3. And the girl that I was dating at the time was a backup singer for Carmen. And so he was doing several shows in Nashville. And so we went and, I sat in and, watched the rehearsals and stuff. And he's going over the stuff, and they get to the end of one song. He's like, all right, I feel the Spirit coming over. Just, what's that? Oh, this isn't when we say I feel the Spirit. What song is it that I say I feel the Spirit? All right. So so we go do one more, and then I tell people to close. And I'm like, so this whole thing where he's like supposedly free flowing this.
Yeah.
Like it was like scripted, down on the stage. He's got the set list. It also like penciled in, when do you say things that sound like Christian-y, led by the Spirit or whatever. And watching them argue and fight and swear at each other over when the Spirit is supposed to hit. I was like, hold on now, because Carmen was the guy, like, because he gave free concerts, so he's not in it for the money. Everyone else is in it for the money. He's just in it for the Spirit. And then going, are you telling me that somebody's public facing persona isn't real?
He never missed to pass the bucket.
No, he did not.
At every free concert. That never failed.
I'm going to give my answer to the question.
When
and
did
James,
he pass the bucket?
Yeah, we got to talk about how that plays into the chaining of events. But I'm going to give my answer to the question that I asked Shane, but then I got to find a way to rephrase it for you, James. No, it's all good. I love that. I love the fact that you're neurodivergent, and that causes us to think about things a different way. But I think about when I was growing up in church, and even when I became a devoted Christian, it was okay for Christian themes, these ideas that I got from these worship songs. It was okay when those themes came dancing into my head hours later after the song service was over. The music gets stuck in your head. You start singing it again later. You start thinking about it. That must be the way God designed it. On the opposite end of that, whenever I would listen to a secular song, when the secular lyrics or tunes would come dancing in my head later on, I would always feel guilty about that. I don't want to have the secular lyrics dancing in my head. I don't want to I don't want them living in my head rent free for weeks and months on end, years on end, pulling up lyrics that I heard, in a car ride, and they're not God honoring lyrics. So now I've deconverted. Now I'm free to listen to whatever I want. And even if it comes dancing in my head, I should feel no guilt. But one of the lingering impacts of that whole thing is, even to this day, I feel some type of way about listening to certain kinds of music because I feel guilty if lyrics that would not have been quote unquote God honoring when I was a Christian, I don't want those lyrics coming back dancing in my mind later on. And I have to kind of like check myself like, hey, it's okay. Like it's fine. And I wonder if it's ever going to come a time where the opposite happens, where I hear something Christian and I turn that off. Like, no, I don't want that to come dancing in my mind later on. But there was this training of, it's going to get stuck in your head. So what is it okay to have on that kind of a loop? Secular things, no. Godly things, yes. And even now I kind of have to fight those battles. So it's one of the lingering impacts. But I guess for you, James, in the way that you experience it all, lingering impact from, even if not the worship service, the worship lifestyle.
Right. Yes. I would preface this by saying that I don't know your specific unique circumstance, obviously. I'm speaking generally here. What I would say is these types of modalities, these persuasive, influential modalities, they are most ethically used and most effective if there is an intent first. And I've found that the problem is that the intent of most of these people is genuine, it's authentic, and for the most part they don't even fully realize the tools that they've accumulated over the years and generations of just seeing, well, this works, so this is why we do this, or and so they don't understand the impact of these tools and these techniques and these modalities. And so that's why consent is the most important aspect of before you implement these on yourself or anything, is about intent. What is the end goal? Because like you're saying, for years and years and years down the road, these things, these anchors, these primers, all of these things can have impacts that are detrimental, influential, different things like that. So it's important whenever we talk about these things, we talk about intent first. So the problem is that church doesn't consider intent. The intent is that we get the goal that we want, and it varies from congregation to congregation. They have all the tools. They've acquired them over centuries, and they don't really know they're even using them or implementing.
So then let's talk about
and they
the
haven't
tools
asked
then.
consent. They've
Right.
never said, we're going to use these tools. We're going to use these techniques, because they don't know they're using them. They've never said, though, we're going to do this. Do you want what we're saying we can provide?
We can have a discussion about whether or not they know they're using the tools.
Well,
and
I
whether
think
or
just
not
like
the
Shane
intent.
just illustrated, some do. Some are fully aware.
Yeah.
I mean, on high levels, I would say your high level, like Peter Popoff, your Benny Hinn's, anybody who's doing faith healings at a high level, anybody that's doing these ceremonies at a high level and making millions, they can't help but eventually notice what works and what doesn't work. And
that's interesting that you said Peter Popoff, because he got, do you remember when he got busted back in the 80s
by James Randi?
By James Randi? He was doing actual like stage magician. His wife was feeding him information. People would write down their prayer requests.
He was basically just doing a mentalism act.
He was doing, it was a straight up stage act.
So I do believe at high levels, I can't not believe whenever people get to high levels that they don't know what it is they're doing. I just, at this point, I can't believe it at a certain stage. And that comes from personal experience, because I used to be a faith healer. I actually did travel the world and healed sick. And there was a point where I realized this isn't what I was told it is.
What's the shortest leg you ever made grow out?
I would say it was about 2 inches. 2 inches was the best one.
So right about a swiveled hip distance.
Now hold on, James. When you were doing that, did you know?
No.
Okay.
No. I didn't know. I did.
Wow.
I had learned the technique. I had
Mhm.
learned all of it. I had learned the lead up, how to prime. I had learned all of the steps, even the technique on how to do the faith healing, and didn't even know
Mm.
that it was all a farce. I was
S-
fully convinced that it
Wow.
was all legit.
Wow. So
Yeah,
you were giving
even in the
credit
moment.
and glory to God for the results you were
Yes,
seeing
and
using the
because the
techniques that you had
person
seen.
had legitimately been inducted
Mm.
into a hypnotic state. They were full of
Mm.
adrenaline, the placebo effect, all of these things. They hopped up, danced around, all these things they hadn't done in years, told
Mm.
everybody celebrates, everybody's happy. And then, years later, you realize, like, wow,
Okay.
that was just something I could have induced with hypnosis and had the same exact result. No Jesus, no Holy Spirit. Everything would have been exactly the same. No difference.
So let's
Except
dive in.
now I won't because it's unethical. And
Right.
and if there's something wrong with your hip and it hurts, you should get
Mm.
that fixed and not just have a
Or we
hypnotist.
can go into business together.
Uh,
Take this show on the road.
That's one area that I will not use hypnosis for, and that's pain management.
hmm.
Or one of the many.
So James, let's dive into the hypnosis then,
Okay.
because many people have a sort of a cartoonish idea of what hypnosis is.
Yeah.
Um, what actually is it? And if you can, maybe lay it out in a way that would help us to compare it to what we see happening in worship services or in church services in general.
Okay. Yes. Put me on the spot here, so I'm gonna fly by the seat of my pants and try.
All good. We may have some questions to help steer you from time to time.
Sure. So my first and easiest way to introduce people to the modality of hypnosis is it's not much different than when you catch yourself daydreaming
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden you're aware that you were in a different state
Hmm.
in your mind. And so there you go. We got it.
Okay.
So hypnotists will use all of these things: music, tone, timbre, cadence. All of these
Hmm.
things are part of the toolkit of a hypnotist. However, most linguistic conversational hypnotists rely on language and how
Hmm.
language is structured. So easy ways to induce hypnotic trances are what we call predicate nominatives, which are nouns that aren't really nouns. So if I say, "Hey, Brady, I'd like you to grab some justice, put it in a wheelbarrow, bring it over to me."
Hmm.
This is, that justice is a noun, and we know this instinctively. But if you consider the concept, we need to flesh it out. So it's a
Hmm.
noun, but it's not a noun that I can easily, like my dog right here. I can put my dog in a wheelbarrow and
Hmm.
I can push her over to you. Like that, she's also a noun. Predicate nominatives are these easy ways to induce hypnotic trances and trance states. So just introducing them into conversations is an easy way to induce
Hmm.
hypnotic states, like to draw you within to your own self, because you have to in order to process the information.
Wow.
If I were to say, don't see a black cat running across the screen, the majority of people can't help but see that to
Picture a
try
black
to
cat.
then not see it,
Not see. Wow.
right? And
Hmm.
so these different hypnotic tools are used as ways of forcing your
Hmm.
mind to go into certain altered states, which are typical states we all go into every day, all day, but it's intentional, right? So the hypnotist has an end state in mind. So they're going
Hmm.
to lead you down this pathway, but it's going to go from these simple little steps of normal everyday things like justice. And consider justice for a moment and imagine what that might be like, and take yourself there, go within that. And while you do that, I'd like you to just acknowledge and sit here calmly as you do, and then they just take you down, and you
Hmm.
can't help but be okay with everything that's being said because it relates to your reality that you're experiencing.
Here's what's standing out to
And
me right now. What's standing
yeah,
out is hypnotists have an end state in mind. They know where they
always,
want you.
always intent.
And the idea of altered state of consciousness is I don't want you fully present. Is that what it is?
Yes, I want you to kind of disappear within that imaginative window, that state that whatever is real isn't real anymore. You're
Right, can I
kind of
jump in
going,
and can I ask?
I was about to kick it to
yeah,
you, Shane.
Yeah, I've got some questions for you.
sure,
So a couple things I want to know, and I think other people would love to hear it, is,
yeah,
for example, like the hypnotist stage show where he goes, I'm gonna snap my fingers and you guys are all gonna be chickens, or you're all gonna
sure,
be naked, and then you got people running around. That's kind of what makes people go, all right, this whole hypnotist thing, it's just, yeah, they're paid actors, they're stooges, whatever. And then
sure,
when you talk about altered states, like I understand that when we are awake, that we go through stages of sleeping where
yeah,
the wavelength
yeah,
of the brain, it's
yeah,
um we go through it like 3 or 4 different stages, but when we're awake, people go altered state. Well, that's like, did I take acid or ayahuasca or something? What are the kind of, when you're conscious, what are the different states of mind that you can be in so that a
oh,
person could go, oh, like, oh, okay, altered states while I'm conscious. It is a real
sure.
thing, but it's not thinking I'm a chicken.
Sure. Okay. So scientifically, you've got different waves that your brain frequencies are at, like beta, gamma, like waves and
Mhm.
frequencies, right? I'm not necessarily talking about the different frequencies that your mind is in. This is so simple. It's when I say altered states, I'm talking about just your normal daydreaming. Just when you imagine something, or think about winning the lottery, that's an altered state. Like you're just taking a brief vacation
Mm.
and visiting an alternate reality, but for a moment it can be real. Like you can really live it. And that's what I mean when I talk about altered states. I'm not talking
Okay.
about anything that's like beyond anything beyond that. And all you're doing is, whenever in hypnosis, all you're doing is asking someone to come along for a ride through this window of your own imagination. And but you have an end goal in mind. So you're wanting an end thing, but
So
you
would it
but
be
you
fair?
lead them down. Sorry.
No, no, you're good. Would it be fair to make a comparison? Because you said a few things. You're trying
Hmm.
to get someone, you talk about daydreaming, being in this, you're not necessarily present. You're going to this other place that the
Hmm.
hypnotist wants you to go to.
Hmm.
But if I'm leading worship and I tell you, like I remember back when I was, growing up in church, we sung a song. Song was think about his love, think about his
Hmm.
goodness,
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
about his grace that has
Hmm.
brought you through. And you're thinking
Hmm.
about things like you said, justice. It's not a noun that you can actually put your hand on. It's this
Actually, the word think
concept.
is important. The
Okay.
word think is what we call an awareness
Hmm.
predicate, which means when I say the word think,
Hmm.
notice, remember,
Right.
imagine. These are all
Set your
awareness.
mind on.
Your brain almost immediately gets primed. These are
Hmm.
priming predicates, right?
Hmm.
So your mind almost can't help but now notice something.
Okay.
It can't help but think something. It can't help but imagine something. So these predicates kind of force us, because
Hmm.
this is our language. This is how we process information around us. The minute we
Hmm.
hear it, we can't help but go there. Which is why I kind of use the illustration of don't imagine a black cat
Right.
running across the
Right.
street, is to demonstrate that the minute that I
Hmm.
introduce it, there are certain awareness predicates that your mind is implicit and has to
Hmm.
consider. And hypnotists take
Hmm.
advantage of that. Salespeople,
Hmm.
con men, lots. You have to give your
Well-meaning
consent.
worship leaders.
Yes,
We
yeah,
asked
yeah.
that.
And the problem is that everyone walking into a worship service, for the most part, has given their consent, and
Hmm.
so they don't really know what they're getting involved with whenever they do, but they've given their
Hmm.
consent. There's not much difference between that and your con man who believes that the minute he says, "Excuse me, sir, can I ask you a question?" he believes he's attained consent. And he's about to use all these tricks and all these tools to manipulate you. But you said yes.
Yeah.
The minute he said, "Excuse
Wow.
me, sir, can I ask you a question?" you said yes. That's you just gave consent.
So would you say there's anything close to a one-to-one correlation? And I'm not trying to make this more simplistic than it is.
Sure. No.
But to the hypnotist who's trying to get you in this altered state so that you're not fully present, you're where they want you to be. If the worship leader has you thinking on, like scripture says, right, set your mind on things above, and you're putting your mind on these other things so that you're not really in the present anymore as much as you're focused on being in the presence of God. Is there anything close to a correlation there?
Absolutely. I mean, you're focusing intent, right? Like, first of all, the praise and worship leader is directing you and guiding you toward a potential intent, but you yourself also want that intent. So the whole service is geared toward producing exactly what you wanted when you walked through the doors. And then you were provided with a linguistic model of what you should want. So you walk in the doors saying, it's Sunday morning. I know I've been taught and I know this is where I go to get the goods. So you already know walking through the door, you're totally sold.
Like Shane said, the worship leader and the singer in the crowd, they want the same thing.
Absolutely.
They're on the same mission. We're not here to be entertained.
Absolutely.
We're entering in together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would guess that the majority of worship leaders don't know the tools they're using. I would probably bet, having met I'm sorry, Shane.
No, I was just saying I agree with you.
Yeah. I think the majority of people, and I would even say the majority of salesmen and charismatic con men and things like that who've just gotten by on their looks and personality and charm and things like that, I would say the majority of them all utilize these tools and modalities and have no idea they're doing it.
Historically, up until about 20 years ago, I think a whole lot of them are starting to figure out. And this is, I think, what Brady and I were talking about that sort of kicked off this idea was the evolution of the music itself, where, like I taught myself how to play guitar when I was 13. I bought a $100 guitar and I got a chord book, and you could practice. Like, you don't have to spend hours and hours a day. You sit down, you learn 6 chords, you learn the 3 D, A, G, and C, and you can play, because at church, all the worship songs are either in the key of D or they're in the key of G. And it's 3 chords. And if you just learn those chords, within a week, if you can strum, you can be on the worship team.
Yeah.
And so we had, there's like decades of time where you had people who were not what we would call, like, they weren't known for their musicianship. They were, they wanted to be part of the worship thing. And they're definitely engaged in something, and they've never studied music theory. They don't know anything about frequencies or harmonics, tempo, beat, any of the other. They're up there just doing stuff. And usually they're following one person who goes, well, we know this is effective. This is how we're going to, there's a good chance they don't even know the reason it's effective. They just know that it's effective, and everybody else is just following along, doing the effective thing. And and then you, and
James,
then
that seemed like it.
Go
I
ahead,
absolutely
James.
agree.
James, something that Shane said struck a chord, but
I'm just amening the preacher. That's it.
Okay.
He's nailing it. I genuinely believe that's the majority of it.
So I want to bring it back to Shane in a minute, because he's got some. I want to ask him some worship leader questions, but for the hypnotists, so they have a end state that they want you in. They get you thinking about things, so your mind is you're not in the present anymore. Can you give us any more in terms of what else is the process that they're using? You said they use music,
It's
tone of
it's
voice.
so, you know, what's eerie about hypnosis is that until you focus on it, it really just seems like conversational, normal bonding and rapport. It seems
Mhm,
like what you generally just would do with another person that you care about. The
mhm,
problem is that when it's intentional without consent, that's the issue with hypnosis, right? And
mhm.
so hypnosis, that's really where I have a divergence with, like, I missed the question, Brady. I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
I
I
got
guess
stuck
I
on
guess I was trying to get you
my
back.
train of thought.
All good.
Yeah,
I was trying to get you back to what you were answering before I interrupted
I
you,
apologize.
just with
Yeah,
the kind of helping us see what happens in hypnosis and maybe explaining it in a way that will allow us to compare it to what happens in the worship service. And
right.
so you talked
Okay.
about having that
I think
instinct.
I
You're
was
trying to get
trying to make
into
it. Right. So I apologize. I think I got my train of thought.
no.
So I'm trying to make everyone understand that hypnosis is expounding upon what you do daily. So
Mm,
when somebody smiles at you and you smile back, a stranger.
mm,
If somebody yawns and you yawn, these are
mm,
normal mirroring neuron effects. These are normal social bonding things. Hypnotists use these social bonding things that we do innately
mm,
and naturally, and they just expound upon them in order
mm,
to produce an effect. And
mhm,
it's something that we generally comply with naturally.
mm.
Why wouldn't we? It's easy to get along with somebody you get along with. It's easy to go along with something that you go along with, until all of a sudden
Wow.
you're clucking like a chicken on stage and you didn't know that
Wow.
that was what you were going to end
Yeah,
up
yeah,
doing.
yeah.
Or
So hold on.
storming the Capitol and you didn't know
Yeah. So
that's what
the,
you were going to end up doing. And that was going to be
it's
justified in
it's
your mind.
it's very important what you talked about there, the mirroring aspect. There's something
Mm,
that when somebody waves, somebody smiles, and you don't wave or smile back, you don't just feel impolite. You almost feel wrong because of the
yeah,
social
there's an
cues.
innate, right.
Yeah.
There's an innate thing.
So if a worship
We
leader is
almost feel
saying,
obligated.
yeah, yeah,
We've got it. We
now,
got to
An
commit.
involuntary response almost.
It is. It's an involuntary. It's instinctual, and it's so commonplace that hypnotists just expound upon something that is so
mm,
commonplace, just something we all experience, and it gets blown
mm,
up to this, like, oh, they took control of that person's mind and made him cluck like a chicken. No, they were
mm,
little bitty
mm,
conversational things that you would do with your grandma, and if your grandma ended up asking you to cluck like a chicken, you wouldn't even care. You wouldn't think anything of it. If you trusted
mm,
her, everything's all good. That's all that happened. You just trusted
mm,
somebody and you let them lead you down a path. And then all of a sudden you bought in.
mm.
You just
Wow.
bought in. That's it. And there's part of this gambler's fallacy too, is this, like,
Mm,
I've already invested so much. I can't back out now. I've already trusted
wow.
this person. I've already gone this far, and
Wow.
so there's this other aspect that you can't not
Mm,
have trusted this person. What would that say about your reasoning? What would that say about your logic? What would
mm.
that say about you if you went all
Wow.
this way and now you won't do that?
So hold on, because oh my gosh, there's so much that I could dive into here to talk about. Think about what happens in the church service,
Yeah,
right?
dude.
There are
Yeah, dude.
things that are being, well, lift your hands with me, clap with us. And next thing you know, depending on the kind of church you're in, now you're laughing, now you're
Mhm.
running around, now it's time to give. And like you said, I'm so
You
invested.
found video of me back in Bible school.
I'm so invested that I can't back out now. I trust these people. Can you talk real quick about the group dynamic? Like what happens in a group dynamic where the whole group is clapping, the whole group is singing, the whole group is
Right.
amening, the whole group is listening to what's being said, and they don't think it's crazy. Who am I to think this is crazy? Is there anything like that in hypnosis where there's a group dynamic to it?
Oh, oh, bro. If you can include others
Mm,
into the into the experience, if you can get
Mhm.
two people who are closely
Hmm.
related and trust each other better than they trust you,
Wow.
and if you can get them involved, now
Wow.
their story together becomes
Hmm.
so much stronger, because now it's a unified experience that they both had, and they already have that trust built up. So if you can create an experience between two people who trust one another, now just
Right.
Where two
expound
or
on that.
more gathered in the name.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. You just
So it's
expound
almost
on
like,
that. Like add numbers.
the
Add
hypnotist
numbers.
job.
Yep.
Right. The hypnotist job becomes easier when the people in the crowd or on the stage,
Absolutely.
they're
more
trusting
people,
each other,
the
not
more
the
people that
hypnotist.
buy into it, the easier it
Right.
becomes. Absolutely.
Jeez.
That's why
James-
The
Darren
parallels are
Brown,
ridiculous.
Darren Brown, whenever he runs his psychology experiments, like on Netflix and things like that, he has an audition portion where he weeds out potential people who could not be socially influenced as easily. So he goes through a
Wow.
process of testing to see
Hmm.
which people may be more susceptible to social programming.
Hmm.
We do know that there's about 33% of the population that's a bit more susceptible to social programming. That doesn't, we have no way of identifying who they are or whatever. It's just kind of one of those things.
Probably unrelated, but 33% of the population is just MAGA gung ho. I bet they're not related in any way.
True.
Brady, not Brady. I'm sorry, James. Question for you.
Yes.
So we know that group psychology is a thing where when a group gets large enough, it's like an organism with a mind of its own.
Plenty of studies.
Yeah, a group, people in a group will do things as part of the group that they would never in a million years consider doing on their own. Do we have any idea? Are there any studies? How many people do you have to group together until you tip into that? People kind of surrender their autonomy, and now it's groupthink. Is it 7? Is it 2? Is it 12? I mean, like,
that's outside of my range.
Somebody get on this. Google it.
I genuinely have found it's easy to influence one person. It is infinitely more easy to influence that one person if you can have a confidant. So 2 people. If you just extrapolate that out, it seems to me that if you add, it can only become more convincing. If you add the more confidants that you add to the pool, people following this one, let's just say it's a hypnotist. If you find the more confidants that you can add that believe and say, hey, this guy really does his stuff, the more impactful it's going to be, and the more you can ask that group to do.
That makes me want to ask another
they're
question.
more convincing themselves then.
That's what I was going to ask the very question.
Then the hypnotist's job is done. They're really not even having to do much from that point.
So it's kind of like once you get the wave started, the wave will just.
That's it. You just have to get people engaged. Once an individual becomes engaged, that's great. That's awesome.
Let's segue that right now. Okay, you guys are familiar with the Asbury revival that was going on last month?
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the one that originated back in the 30s.
So I don't know if it's this. I think
Asbury, the town has seen revival every so often, but they just had a recent one I think about 2 months ago.
So it was at one of the college chapel worship sessions. It kept going past the allotted time, and then it kept going, and it kept going, and then it was 24 hours, and then it was 48 hours, and then people were like, oh, there's something going on here, and then people started driving from all over the country. People were flying here from overseas, and it took on a life of its own, and it ran for.
No, I didn't notice it.
Yeah, it ran for a full 2 weeks, solid. Like, did not stop at all, and it was a lot of people were talking about on the news. A lot of my very right-wing, charismatic, evangelical friends and family were talking about how there can't be any explanation for this other than the Holy Spirit came and lent his presence. And I had a perfect parallel to it that had nothing to do with religion. And it was an example of how things take on a life of their own. In 1999, we drove up from Florida to Woodstock, up in Rome, New York. And the very first, we just set up our tent. We were meeting with some friends. We're outside one of the airplane hangars. It was on an Air Force base. And this dude comes by. He's on a skateboard. He's got a djembe on his back. He's smoking a joint, and he like pops off his djembe and sits down and just kind of like starts.
Wait, djembe is like a drum, right?
Yeah, he he starts banging out a beat, and I'm like, all right, this is cool. I want to play along with them. And there was like 12 trash cans that were all, 2 rows of 6 laying next to it. And he had flipped one on its side and was sitting on it to play the djembe. And I'm like, I find the trash can with the least amount of trash in it. And I flipped the trash can over. And so now I'm banging on the top of this upside down trash can lid. And a couple minutes later, somebody else comes over, and then they flip one over. And then a dude walking by with a guitar, he stops. And then now we got a rhythm, and we got some chords and stuff. And over the next 30 minutes, every single one of the trash cans got flipped over, and people started gathering around to see what was going on. It was, some dude who was high and needed to take a break. And then just some people who were like, well, let's do something. We're at Woodstock. We might as well dump some trash out and play drums. But it became a thing where for the entire 3.5-day event, there was all 12 trash cans were constantly being used, because it's like once the crowd got built out and people were like muscling their way up to the front, they didn't know it wasn't like an attraction or something. Like, do I got to buy a ticket for this? How do I get in on the trash can beating? And it was like, nah, when somebody leaves, just step up. But it was funny, because when the whole thing at the end, it just descended into chaos on the last night. On Sunday night, there were the bonfires and everything. And I said the drum circle thing, it was like the 4 guys when the Titanic was going down, the quartet that just couldn't leave and go get in the boat. And they like, and until they went underwater, they weren't going to stop playing. And so the people banging on the trash cans, they had to finally be ushered out by the SWAT or the state police or whoever it was. But for 3 days, it took on a life of its own.
Right.
It wasn't because the spirit was taken over. It's just, all right, well, something got started. And then now that it started, I want to be a part of it. And then that just perpetuates itself.
Wow. Well, you know how the Alsbury thing ended recently, right? The one that's happened, that revival ended. On my channel, we did an episode about it. It ended because they basically got tired of it. Like they wanted to get back to normal life. But it sort of ties into what we're talking about in terms of the idea of hypnosis putting you in a different state, because maybe I'll ask you about that, James. It seems like with the revival that just ended, a couple months ago, they put themselves in a different state for a while until it became incumbent upon them that, hey, you know what? This isn't really real life. And even though we think this was the spirit, we're kind of tired of the spirit at this point. We got to get back to class. We need to graduate. We need to, we got work to go. Like at some point, you even if you were in an altered state, you realize that there's a state you need to get back to. And I guess I'm wondering, in hypnosis, the thing we see, on TV, when I snap my fingers, you will whatever. Like, does hypnosis end that way, or can it end with just someone realizing that this altered state is not the state that I need to be in right now?
That's an excellent question and super easy for me to answer. The effect of hypnosis depends upon each individual client. So they really do end up taking away with them whatever, like the long-term effects are individualistic, which is why I stress so much about consent, is that the client has to understand the outcome and what it is they're asking for, because Famously, Milton Erickson who is called the grandfather of hypnosis or hypnotherapy. And he used to say a single word can trigger an effect that will last a lifetime.
Hmm.
And I genuinely believe that if it's in the belief of the person,
Mm-hmm.
certain anchors, certain words it will echo throughout the
Hmm.
life of that person.
Wow.
And hypnosis is no different. No different than a word. You know, if your dad said, "I'm proud of you," or if
Mm-hmm.
somebody said, "You're a failure," and it just
Mm-hmm.
sticks with you, and it just
Hmm.
echoes throughout your journey. Hypnosis is no different.
Hmm.
If you allow a belief to settle, it'll be there forever. But
Wow.
it's not any more powerful than the next moment that you decide that you want something different.
Wow. 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 So this makes me think about the work that decoded Christians uh, are
Mm,
doing, because I think a
mm,
lot of times we are helping each other come out of the hypnosis of faith. Whatever the
I
little
agree.
words that we had that gave us a whether it was purpose, whether it was
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
loved, or whether it was
Direction.
direct, all these things that we got
Yeah,
from our
yeah,
religion,
yeah,
the ways that we think, oh, I can't do that, purity culture, whatever,
yeah, yeah.
we're still helping each other little by little come out from that. So before I kick the Shane for what the music does to usher people in, last thing I'll ask you, James, you might have already covered it, but can you talk about the suggestions in hypnosis? You may have already said it, but you talked about that trusting relationship as if you're talking with your grandmother. If she asked you to do X, Y, and Z, depending on how much trust and how intimate the convo, you might just do it. Is there anything more to the suggestion and the suggestibility than what you've already said? Because in a minute, I want to tie that into the messages that we receive in the sermons after the music has already done its job.
Mm, mm, right. So in hypnosis, our suggestions are not implemented until we have somebody in what we call a trance state or hypnotic state. It just means you've gotten that person to a place to where they're highly susceptible to whatever you're going to influence them with.
Mm.
And so at that time is the only time we really put in suggestions, uh, anchors, things like that.
Is that
And
the post hypnotic or no?
it's like it's the main it's the main process of hypnosis.
Okay.
The main thing you're wanting to do is implement the suggestion to get
Hmm.
a desired result. So
Okay.
what's really impressive about hypnosis and what makes it super impressive is when you can suggest something and not like say it specifically, and then the person later on experiences that thing. Like if I were to
Okay.
say later on, you'll experience a feeling of joy and elation as you stand. So really the suggestion is about that it'll happen when they stand. And that's the focus. But you don't you leave that in the hypnotic trance, like in the while you're doing the suggestibility. And
Mm.
it's even kind of like a pass away. Like you don't really focus on it. It's just
Mm.
inserted at the right time, that
Mm.
right suggestibility at the right time. And then you just leave it.
Mm.
And that's where the suggestibility comes in hypnosis, is that you want that suggestibility
Mm.
to be intentional toward an outcome, but you know when you're dropping it as a
Hmm.
hypnotist if you're skilled. Now there are
Hmm.
some hypnotists that don't know that they're doing it when they do it, but
Hmm.
but a skilled hypnotist knows when they're dropping the suggestion and why they're doing it and what the intended outcome is.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there may be some difference in that with the preaching that we receive.
Mm,
Like preachers are not necessarily suggesting, like you can imagine how effective, or at least the test for the effectiveness would be if they said
Mhm.
later on you're going to succeed in not watching porn. Later on, you're going to succeed in.
That is specifically a suggestive hypnotic induction. Even if you're fully awake, you haven't gone through the hypnosis. When a preacher says something like that, you'll begin to notice this next week that the Holy Spirit calls out to you whenever you used to want to grab those Funyuns. You know,
Good
things
Alex
like that.
Jones impression right there.
Thank you. Used to do it. So that's the type of thing that is actually a hypnotic induction.
Wow.
It's a suggestion, and then you'll notice it later in the week. You can't help it because you were in such a suggestive state. You were susceptible. You were ready.
Wow.
You were totally fully accepting it. Well, your subconscious listening better than you are, better than better than we are.
Wow.
Well, your subconscious knew it, grabbed onto it, and the minute that happened, anything close, your mind will make that connection, and it happens to us all the time.
Okay.
Happens to me constantly, and I'm aware of this stuff. I told my fiance today, we were leaving T-Mobile because she upgraded her phone. We drove by a Subway. I don't like Subway. I don't eat Subway. I don't want Subway. But I just watched a John Oliver episode where he talked about Subway the whole damn time. We were driving by and I was like, baby, I want Subway. I don't like Subway. I don't really want Subway, but I want Subway. I just saw the logo and now I want it. These are things that, marketers take advantage of us all the time. It's just part of our innate character. It's not something that we have to be upset about, afraid of. But the more aware you become, the more knowledge you have, just equip yourself. And that way, what's the harm in knowing it? You know, knowing that we're like this, that doesn't make you less than. It doesn't make us stupid. It doesn't make us, just knowing what we are is not bad.
It helps to breed that healthy skepticism so that you can ask yourself, why do I want what I want?
Absolutely.
Why am I?
Take a second guess whenever that person says, can I ask you a question? Say, hang on. I don't know. About what? Pump the brakes.
So Shane, you were a worship leader, Christian musician. You told me a story that I hope you get to tell the world one day. But for
lots of copyright issues with telling that story.
Your story is way cooler than mine.
So, but as a musician,
yes,
we often you watch a movie and you hardly ever see a car chase without music. You hardly ever see a love scene without music. You hardly ever see a fight scene without music, because the music is there to tell you how you should feel about what you're seeing. The music creates the acceptance, the expectation in you for what you're seeing. Like this fits. This is right. But when I'm in church and the music is going and I'm joining the worship leader, what happens with the music in that setting is not the same as what happens with the music when I'm watching TV or, any other place. The music there is special, right? Like I can feel the spirit of God at work when we sing this particular song and the way the music, that's not the same, is it?
The difference is that film scores know what to play to tap into a very specific emotion. So the director will bring his cut over of the scene, and the score will have his keyboard set up, and there'll be a big video screen, and the thing is playing, and the director will be telling him, this is what I want to convey here. And it's the scorer's job to musically compose, arrange something that captures the idea. And I was wanting to get into this because it was specifically a movie moment. It was.
Could you demonstrate?
Well, I'll give you the scene that did it for me. when Braveheart came out, I just graduated high school. So this would have been 95. And it was like a couple days after graduation. My buddy called me. He's like, dude, I just saw the greatest movie in the world, just swords and heads everywhere. So we went to go see it. And then I think we ended up seeing it like 30 times. But the first battle scene, when they all come out and their faces painted blue, and they got the kilts, they turn around and Moon, the English, and William Wallace is riding up and down, and he gives the speech about how they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. And the goosebumps, and when I bought the second movie ticket for that one moment where I could experience, it was like.
Do you remember the score? Can you play it?
I don't remember the score. I can tell you it was James Horner. I can tell you that I've got it on my iTunes in my favorites. So I think it's been played about 1,000 times right now. But
I think we're going to hear some chords in a second. Shane's got his keyboard out. We'll get to the music in a minute.
I was trying to push that demonstration, that moment, and get us there, man. Help me feel that shit.
Well, it was a couple years later when I was watching an interview. It was like a masterclass before masterclass. And they were talking about how music works, and they brought this exact scene out. And he goes, first, we're going to play you the scene from the movie. And it's like it's a 60-second clip. He goes, now watch this. We're going to play it again and take the sound bed out. And it's the way they filmed it on set that day, where, you got Mel Gibson riding up and down and yelling his words, and the emotional impact is gone. There's absolutely nothing to it. It's the music perfectly accompanying it that elicited that goosebump inducing go, I have to get some more of this. I got to get some more of this.
Right.
And the film score knows that. In church, I think they're doing the same thing, but it's like kids playing with, it'd be like, if you took some natives out of the jungle who had never experienced society and gave them like a smartphone that controlled the AC and the television and the garage door opener, and they're just hitting stuff and they can't figure out what's happening or why. It's like a magical device they have no control over.
Wow.
So, like James was saying earlier, when you get to the very top levels, the people who are doing performance art, like your Peter Popoff or your Benny Hinn's, that those services are structured the way they are down to a T, with people who know what they're doing and why. When you come down a few levels, there's just people who go, I know this works, but they have no idea. And so there are a million different ways that you can use music. Chord progressions, melody, tempo, time, arrangements, what instruments are being used to just turn emotion on and off.
Hold on, Shane. I have a really good friend of mine who deconverted about 10 years before I did. And he's a Christian musician. Well, he was a Christian musician. He played in church. And when he deconverted, I don't know how much I can say. Well, when he deconverted, he was still playing at a few churches. And he remembers being responsible for people in the church. It was a black church. He was responsible for them catching the spirit. Here he is, a non-believer now, but remembering, when I do this, this is when they're going to, and he's controlling when, quote unquote, the spirit falls with what he does on his instrument. And so, even though he's probably not up there at the Peter Popoff level,
that's it.
Here we go.
That's the shit right
Come on, brother. Testify now.
Get us jazzed up.
So, yeah, I mean, that's how you bring the spirit in. You need a Hammond B3.
Okay.
That's the official.
The official keyboard.
Now the white church has a different official instrument.
Okay.
And I think that's the acoustic guitar.
Okay.
Played in the key of G.
Okay.
But I'll give you another example of, before we get into specifically how it's used in church. James, you all right there? Do we need to pause and pray over you, sir?
That got me. No, I'm good. I'm back. That got me. That got me. That legit got me. I'm sorry. That brought me back.
Another example of how people who understand the effects of music, how they can
Mhm.
work something very, very specific that other people, they'll have a visceral response to. And they'll go, I can't quite put my finger on why. And one of the best examples I can think of, if I said Star Spangled Banner, national anthem, who did the best national anthem ever? What's the answer that, almost universal? It's Whitney Houston. It was the 91 Super Bowl. Everyone, for some reason.
I was going to say Hendrix. Not going to lie. I fully had Hendrix.
Both of those were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did Hendrix do his? Was that at Woodstock?
Yeah.
No.
I think it was.
I believe it was.
What? Oh, so you meant a ball game. My bad. Sorry, Shane. You said the
No, that's fine. All right. So if we were just going with singers, who did the
right? My bad.
Because every time Super Bowl rolls around, I go, who's singing? Vegas is taking bets on how long it's going to run. What's the over under? Is it a minute 58? Is it 2 minutes, 2 seconds, whatever? But pretty much in agreement, everyone goes Whitney Houston's 1991 Super Bowl national anthem was the greatest of all time. Now, if you go back and look and listen to it, Whitney sang it very straightforward. She had the diva ability to do all kinds of vocal runs, and we've heard way better just vocal performances since then. People have hit higher notes since then. People have been way more showy about it, and people go, there was just something about that, and I can't put my finger on it. I go, well, if you're a musician, and especially if you're a drummer, you can put your finger right on it, because the national anthem is written in 3/4 time. It's a waltz. That particular arrangement that I was a producer, I want to say it was John Clayton, great, fantastic jazz player. They arranged it in 4/4 time. 4/4 is a march. And the only other time, it's a march. So there's a completely different rhythm to it. And so other people have sang it more.
I'm glad I'm keeping up. I'm not, but I'm glad I'm keeping up. I got this. I can get this.
I'm glad you're here. That was the answer. If you go, all right, well, if she's not singing higher notes and she's not doing fancier runs,
can you clap me the difference between 3/4 and 4/4 real quick, just so the audience knows?
Yeah, so 3/4 is just how many beats are in a measure. So the typical
show me how that works.
Goes, oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What she did was she slowed it down a little bit, and then it had 4 beats in it. Did you just want to see me act a fool right there?
No,
I actually, this is for the audience in case we don't have it. Everybody may not be a musician. I don't know that I could just on command clap the difference between 3/4, 4/4 if somebody asked me to. So I was just doing it for the audience.
It's good.
I really wasn't trying to splash them. I promise I'll do that later.
Did you hypnotize me?
Fully.
I'm here for it.
You're totally into it.
Guys, if I start clucking like a chicken, I had nothing. It wasn't.
I promise that would never be what I make you do. When you'll do it and you'll notice. You'll know it was me. That's called hypnotic induction, and I have it. I assure you.
And he wants your consent before he does anything, so he's not going to just
absolutely correct.
He's an ethical.
I will never provide hypnosis for anything you don't specifically request.
I want to try the chicken thing sometime, but
I'm down to try it, man. We'll see how it goes.
Do it here on Ichabod. Come back on the show.
live on.
No, but Shane, make your point though, because I
believe that
we were all tracking with you. Go ahead, make your point, Shane.
So the point was, this was a very calculated decision to do this in a march, a 4/4 march instead of a 3/4 waltz. And people who are familiar with the song, who don't know, they've never heard time signatures before. They couldn't tell you what a time signature is. They knew there was something about it. They just couldn't quite put their finger on it. And even, it's the only other example that I can think of somebody doing that at Obama's inauguration, Beyonce. Did a 4/4 rendition where she did the very last in Bombs Bursting in the Air. The track reverted to 3/4. And so you got
pretty awesome.
like a weird little twist, because all of a sudden the melody changes, but then for the last line, she reverts back to 4/4, and there is this just goosebump induced. You know, oof, I mean, I got all patriotic,
Wow.
nationalistic.
You felt the spirit.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what people, they're using all of these musical techniques. Like if you go off to music college, you're going to use all kinds of arrangement, composition techniques, especially if you're studying, you know, film scoring. If that's the thing where you have to learn how to convey emotion, not just how to play along with a conductor. And so there are so many musical tools at play.
Right.
That people, if you don't know what the tools are, you have no idea that the tools, James, it's almost exact. It's a language, like you said, where you're talking about specifically verbal language. It's a musical language where people are being influenced and they have no idea.
Well, hold on, because I was thinking this the whole time, but you just gave me the perfect segue. Proof that is a language. Put a typical white churchgoer in a black church on Sunday, and they might have a harder time feeling the spirit because the music is not speaking their language. Put a typical black churchgoer in a white church. They will definitely have a hard time feeling the spirit.
Wow.
Because the music is not speaking
on the one
and the three, right?
Here's the thing though, Brady. You're talking to two missionary kids, like we had to. How much of a chameleon are you, Shane? Like, how many languages you speak?
I was fluent in Mandarin, and that's when we were over in Asia. That's the only one I picked up.
Yeah. So we grew up just you got to fit in, like you got to make it work. Like you got to become part of the crew. Right. And so,
but you would think if it's the Spirit of God doing this, you wouldn't have to do anything. You could play.
Yeah, exactly.
You could be a black person in a white church and still feel the spirit. You could be a white person in a black church and still feel the spirit.
I got taught to be able to be a chameleon and transition between the groups. So I played guitar for a black church. That was pretty much my actually.
And you learned how to musically speak that language, didn't you?
Absolutely. I learned like this is the vibe. This is how we go here. And I'm not gifted or anything like that, but I fit in there fine. And I just, but that was the agenda growing up, was that it was your job, to fill in the gaps. Yeah. I don't think most normal kids are instructed in that way, so you're not really given that, you will fit in. If you're with Mexican kids, you're learning Spanish. If we move to Nigeria, you're learning Nigerian. Like you're doing what we do.
But if you're in America,
that's
What did Dr. King say? The 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated time in America. Why? Because we're not learning each other's language, and we want the Spirit to speak to us in our own musical language. But as Shane was saying, it is a language, and people are communicating. This means joy in this language. This means
it's okay.
This means it's time to pray in this language. This means it's time to give in this musical language. We're
I'm so sorry, guys.
It's all good. All good. This is life. But the music primes people in languages that they've already learned to speak. I know how to speak that musical language. Yeah. Sorry, Shane, to cut you off there, but you got your keys out. You were telling me before about this common chord that for a lot of churches, depending on if you speak that church language, these chords are worship chords, but they're not necessarily as sacred as people think.
Well, back when I was, 80s, 90s, when I was coming up in the church, and every Sunday, the worship thing, like I said, it was 3 chords. Like if you got up, let me get a nice piano sound so it doesn't reverberate too bad. So if we're doing a typical Sunday song, it's going to have these 3 chords. It's going to have this. and it's going to be some combination of those.
Yeah.
And if you learn the 3 chords, it was like really easy to get in, like to play along. And like my parents were always kind of impressed that I could just sit down with people who are playing a song that I hadn't heard before and just start playing along. And I'm like, well, I've been in piano lessons since I was 4 years old, and it's like split between technical playing and then music theory. And so if we're playing a 3-note song and we're on or a 3-chord song and we're on 1 chord right now, I know there's only 2 we could possibly go to. Even there's a ton of chords on the piano, there's only 2 in this song. And when you are familiar with music, you can just kind of hear which one probably going to next. So it wasn't that there was a whole lot of talent or skill or whatever involved. It was just really, really fundamental, like white belt basic levels of music theory to be able to follow along. But it was the experience through junior high, grade school, high school. Nothing ever came. I never quite felt that exuberance that I felt when I was 2 or 3 running up and down the aisles at Christ for the Nations. The one place that I did feel it, James, we talked about
I've been to that campus, by the way. I didn't share that before, but I spent 2 summer camps at Youth for the Nations, Christ for the Nations campsite. So I've been there.
So, and I know you did this too.
Yes.
Acquire the Fire.
Yes, I did. I actually did it here in Tulsa. So I'm in Tulsa. And I was one of the leaders for it. And I did the Ron Luce tour, the Live the Difference tour. That was, I was. Yeah,
so Brady, are you familiar with this?
So I think Cross Movement might have played at Acquire the Fire and Teen Mania. Though I think we may have played those once or twice.
They were hard,
so for those
hardcore.
So so Acquire the Fire was like kind of a traveling weekend revival type thing for teens.
Hardcore,
usually
intensive. It was 2-3 days.
And they would book like a convention center or whatever. The whole youth group would go stay at the hotel for the weekend. So it kicks off Friday night. You've got a service. You've got the Saturday morning. There's like 3 or 4. Then there's another 3 or 4, and it's just all day, every day, worship, Ron Luce talks. Break for lunch, worship, Ron Luce talks. And in those worship settings, there was absolutely something that I did not experience in Sunday morning church. And at the time we were going,
it was eerie, man.
It was, I mean, it was like it was an hour and a half of just goosebump inducing.
It was something I haven't experienced since. What they were able to
conjure up.
Yeah. In that production, it seems like it couldn't be less than maniacal. Whenever I look back on it, it was so well orchestrated, so well put together. It impacted so many young people in a way that I can't imagine that many people don't remember that if they did that event. I can't imagine there's anybody that doesn't remember that experience.
And then like years later looking back, and it's, what was it about that? The same way with Braveheart, we go, what was it about that scene with Whitney Houston's national anthem? What was it about that performance?
What was it, Shane?
And I go, what was it about that weekend that just it gave you if that didn't convince you that the presence of the Spirit had arrived, like if you didn't feel it, you're just dead inside. Well, it was a multimedia sensory experience. Remember, first off, they would turn down the lights. So it's not like a church service where all the lights, it's not bright. It comes down, it's like a concert.
So you have to focus on what's happening on the stage because you can't see anything else.
You've got spotlights, you've got like not pyrotechnics. I don't think they had actual fire, but like
no, not back then. No. Yeah, it was all lighting. Yeah.
They had the strobes, the multicolored lights. They had the great big video screens. So when you're singing about the Spirit or whatever, there's like a slow motion dove flying in front of a rainbow, and it's just.
So hold on, I'm seeing the connection here. I don't know, James didn't talk about this, but in the hypnosis, if part of getting you to an altered state is to kind of get you to not be totally present, maybe you're focused on something else. If you turn the lights down and you have to focus on the screens and the stage and that dove and all that, that does sort of sound like that. There's a correlation there between
It's almost like
here's
a
what we
movie
want you to
going
focus on.
experience.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
James.
Can I weigh in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my first workshops where I was trying to educate people on hypnosis and the way things like this work, I had a former Marine who told me that anytime they were being interrogated by an official, a superior officer, for any reason, like did you make your bunk or whatever it was, they were forced to stare yard while they answered. So in other words, they had to find an eye focal point on the horizon and for them to answer. And he asked me if there was any correlation between eye focus and this hypnotic induction. Like, can you force? Basically, that's what he was asking me. Can you force someone else to have this type of experience if you reduce their vision and force them to focus on something? And Shane, whenever you pulled up the watch,
Definitely real.
that is where that comes from. Eye fixation.
Wow.
Eye fixation. And
so this makes me think about. Go ahead. Finish that, James.
Today in mental health care, we use something called eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR. It's something that I cover only the introduction to the modality, but eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And it's a way to use eye movement because when you remember a past event that's traumatic, your eyes will automatically move to a certain location. If you force your eyes to not move to that location, you change the way that your brain processes the information. Right. I know. It's eerie, but it might be connected to what you're talking about. With this zoning and this and I don't actually know. This is a speculation, and I'm just bringing in something that I know about.
Yeah.
So.
Well, again, this seems like one of the things where people have kind of stumbled on it because, again, worship was a certain way at church where there wasn't really the spirit.
I fully agree with that.
We would go to acquire the fire where we would feel it. And then, I had 20 years ago is when I kind of made my deconversion, and I hadn't paid any attention. And my wife loves, the channels that she watches on YouTube. One of them is always talking about the Hillsong Church, like their scandals and stuff. And so I've heard all about Hillsong. I've never heard any of the stuff that they do, but I'm very familiar with them as, prominent global worship leaders and stuff like that. So a couple of weeks ago, when I'm sitting here at my computer, I've always got music on, and I've found a YouTube like Hillsong playlist, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, this is good music. Like
it's really good.
It's really good. And I was like, there's a thing they did in Brady. This is a chord that I was talking about. Okay. Traditionally, and this is not every song, obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but the formula for church music was the 1, the 4, and the 5. And it was some combination of that all over and over. And if you're not a musician, or if you don't have any familiarity with it, it's the musical equivalent of like a 3-year-old learning their primary colors. Their candy apple red, their banana yellow, and their bright blue. Those are just, everything else is made from those, but it's really, really simple stuff. It's not the kind of thing, I'm in a mood. I want to listen to something in my car. You don't jam to church music in your car. What I heard in Hillsong is there are maybe 10 chord progressions in pop music.
Hmm.
There might be 11 or 12. There's probably 3 to 5 that are super common, but the most used is the addition of the 6, which is a minor. It's so our 4 chords now, instead of just being this, we add this 6 minor. And that is the formula that like Max Martin and these top, the Grammy winning, the guys that produced Backstreet and Britney and Katy Perry, like all these.
Brady, did you ever talk to anybody that was Grammy nominated or anything?
Say again?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So there's, I mean, they do seminars and like weekend conferences. If you want, how do you write? What's the formula to write a hit song? Everybody wants a hit song, and they go, well, not every number one has this 4 chord progression, and not every 4 chord progression it hits number one. But usually, if you want to guarantee the most likelihood of success, you put in this this 6 minor chord, because it does something. They would hook it up to people, the ECGs, whatever it is. That what's the thing called, where they can watch the brain waves. There was
fMRI scanner.
Okay, I'll go with that.
fMRI. Yeah.
fMRI.
I think that's what you're referencing.
I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm talking about half the time.
That's the easiest way to monitor brain waves, or it's the oldest and easiest way.
Well, they would hook people up to this, and they would play various chord progressions and just see what the brain is doing inside. In this particular,
I think actually, I don't know that that's the best way.
We won't hold you to it.
Sorry.
But they would, I think they were playing a Britney Spears song for him. And like one of the guys that they had hooked up, they asked him, do you like Britney Spears? He's like, oh man, I freaking hate that bubblegum pop stuff. I'm like, what do you like? I like metal, man. And so they play this, and he's telling us he hates the stuff. He's telling us he can't stand it. But this 1, 4, 5, 6 minor is making his brain. Basically, it's like a polygraph that's just called him a liar. His brain inside is saying, oh, you love this. So this chord, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's, the mathematical relationship between chords and notes. Right. Some of them are dissonant. Some of them are soothing. Some of them create tension. Some of them just work together in this perfect harmony. And that 1, 4, 5, 6 minor is, of all the chord progressions, that's the
Shane?
Yes.
Have you read Gödel, Escher, Bach?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I believe you're actually expounding on the author's premise from the book, Gödel, Escher, Bach.
Make sure when we're done that I get that full name so I can look that up.
What you're expressing right now seems super in that vein.
So the worship team, basically they found the missing chord that took the songs from like primary kid stuff to I listened to this for real. And then there were subtle things like the instrumentation. Back when we were, and this is one of the things that Acquire the Fire did differently, is they introduced, they would have keyboards, and so you've got the piano, and then they would have like some big lush epic pad like you hear at a rave, just like and it creates this big massive wall of sound. It's an expansive sound. And when you do this 1, 4, 5 with this really, really lush fat setting, you're getting something you're not getting in church. And this is I noticed on their stage performances, everyone's kind of starting to model the Acquire the Fire stage. Like every stage now, Sunday morning has to look like it's hosting the VMA Awards. It's there's video screens up there. There's the light show that's going on. There's the spotlight. The lights in the congregation, they're turned down low. I mean, you're creating this epic kind of experience. And then when you've got people who are, playing like I mean, you can create a sound that just it just feels big, and people, the
Feels
goose
good.
it feels good. You don't know what's coming, but you can. It's almost like, in the club when you can feel the drop coming, like you feel it. You feel it, the build up, and it's a combination
Club,
of
right?
it's a combination of
Back in my 30s, that was dope.
Yes, we did a lot.
You guys are older than me.
So hold on,
and you
Shane.
look
You're
so much younger.
Shane. You're saying the church is just now getting up on the chord progression that gave all the feels.
The
Ron Luce found it. They Acquire the Fire figured it out, and I think everybody adopted it. It seems like it was so powerful. It just hit.
Mm-hmm. It's like Christianity, like, collectively decided that U2's the Joshua Tree album in that tour.
Yeah.
Like, everybody was going to do it. Stars of Clay was going to do it. Sunday Morning is going to do it. Everybody. All right. And they were one of the first big acts, I think, to use the video, like the production
fully worked.
It creates a vibe. It creates a thing. Like,
still does. It works. It works.
So let me try to tie this up here, because we're coming up on 2 hours, but I'm thinking about what we used to do as Cross Movement as we traveled the world. We didn't have the live instrumentation. We had, our beats were, pre-packaged and all that, but we did use the music to get a message across. And I remember the first time, I didn't grow up going to secular rap concerts. So the first time I went to a secular rap concert, I was already an adult and already in full-time Christian music ministry. And I think the concert was Talib Kweli and Common. They played in Philly. That's the first time I went to a secular rap show. And I remember being very disappointed because they did not do what we as Cross Movement did. And I remember feeling cheated. Here's what they did. They came out, they performed their songs. They said almost nothing in between the songs. And I remember saying, that's not how you do this. Because what we were used to doing was using our music to set the stage for us to say something to the people. And so after the music had played, even though we were giving messages during our songs because we're rapping, we still would seize the moment to, now that I got you, now that you're roped in, now that you have had all the feels that the music would produce, let me say something to you. And I remember the secular artists, they weren't doing that.
Whose idea was it to format the show in that way? Sorry, your way. Like who formatted it that way? Because you guys were in charge of most of it, or no? Or
no, no one made us do that.
Right.
But I think
so. Who was in charge of this decision?
We always saw ourselves as musical missionaries, as preachers on the mic. And so I think we would have felt like we were cheating audiences, or not audiences, God, if all we did was do music when we were called to preach. And yes, our music preached too, but if we don't add that extra, hey, here's what's on my heart tonight, here's what God wants me to share with you, if we don't preach, we felt like we weren't really doing our full job. But in a lot of ways, we were simply doing what you do in church. You use your music to set the stage to drop that message. Once you've got them, and I don't think we thought about it in these terms, but once you got them suggestible, now you've got to give them something. What's the point of getting them suggestible if you're not going to give them something?
Is that something that you're holding on to now, or is that something?
Well, now I don't do music anymore, so I don't know how I would.
No. I'm saying you obviously weren't thinking that way in the moment. Like you guys weren't thinking we're setting it up.
No, but I think we saw the wisdom in it. We saw the wisdom in.
Okay.
Oh,
but you don't feel the heaviness
music
of
got
that
to you
now.
When you say the heaviness, what do you mean?
I just mean
like the pressure to do that, or
you didn't have intent. right? Like your intent has always been pure and has been
Well,
like
but
it's been you've been
even if you have
constantly been
pure
trying to
intent,
do the right thing.
right? Even if
So
you
it
have pure
wasn't like
intent,
you
it's still intent.
intended. Ah, okay. All right.
You know what I mean? Like I think the intent was
I just,
pure.
you know,
It was pure,
I
but
just,
it was still
but you weren't
the
trying
intention
to
of.
set something up. You
No,
didn't
I
know
think
you
we
were doing
were.
that.
I think we were.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I think
All
we
right.
really
All right.
we really saw the music as
That's fair.
setting the
That's fair.
stage for the
That's fair.
gospel presentation.
Yeah,
That's fair.
and
That's fair.
I agree with you. I know, like nobody holds a church service, not a
Right.
church service, like a normal one where they're not hoping that somebody's there for the altar call. If they can just save one
Right.
soul. And we know that first we got to get, and this, James, goes back to what you were saying at the beginning. Like, how do we,
Yeah.
we're going to ask you to do some things today that are going to be a little bit uncomfortable. There's going to be a sales pitch at the end. So we got to like prime you. We're going to ask you for money, but then we're going to also ask you for a life commitment. It's almost twice as bad as a timeshare. So we've got to prime.
It's less than half that. That goes on to your children. Don't buy one. Everybody, I abstain.
So if you're starting a new church and you've never pastored before, you know, all right, we've got the organist is playing while people are milling around.
I need a band.
And then we're going to kick, what are we going to kick it off with? Something upbeat. Let's get people clapping. If it's a dancing church, then we'll get people dancing.
Make them happy. They've got to be happy.
They're dropping their inhibitions. They're dropping their inhibitions. All right, the first song, maybe they're looking side to side to see if anybody's
looking. Can we pause for a second?
Yeah.
You just said they're dropping their inhibitions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, was that a legit? Like,
you had to get. I know. For me, like
I'm just asking because
it's a great question. It's a great moment to pause on.
Yeah. I was one of those people that never felt comfortable lifting my hands. And like there's the degrees of the hand lift. There's like
degrees of dropping your inhibitions is what you're saying. So you're getting degrees of dropping your inhibitions.
Yeah, and if you're
like first maybe clap your hands. First, and then
Mm.
you feel comfortable doing this.
Well, here's no.
First is clap your hands. No. First is clap your hands. Then it's close your eyes.
Close your eyes.
Okay. Because if you close your eyes, you're not worried about who's looking at you anymore. So you're freer to do the next thing, which is lift your hands.
Lift your hand.
I was curious to know if this was a systematic thing that I didn't know about. And if you, Shane, had been exposed to that, like slowly dropping your inhibition.
I think you pick up on it.
Like,
I think you pick up on it.
Yeah, it's
so maybe this is something that you just already have fleshed out, Shane. It's not something that that worship leaders are implementing intentionally.
No. I mean, like for me,
did I miss what you were saying? Because I'm trying to just get it, and I apologize if I'm being too intrusive.
No, I think you went a little bit of a different direction than I was going, but
I apologize.
No, it's a good
segue.
Additional idea. There are a lot of people that they go right in as soon as the first song starts. They're in praise mode, and it's like the people who go out to the club. You know, there's always like people that are out on the dance floor all by themselves. They don't care
already.
Right.
Right. And you know, you're at the bar with your buddies, and you're like, you want to dance? Let me get a couple drinks in me. And you got to kind of loosen up. By the end of the night, you're all in. You're the dance floor's packed. You're into it. You don't care, whatever. But it's that the segue from all right, I'm going to set my beer down. Then you go out into the dance floor, and you kind of do the little.
And then when your song comes on, if your song comes on,
that's when it's that
jam hits. Yeah,
because what you're talking about is the worship experience. Like I know me.
Can I pause and just ask a question?
Sure.
Are we all collectively agreeing that the element of slowly dropping your inhibitions is kind of the goal in a lot of these settings?
I think
it's not just it's the club, it's the church. It's the goal of music has been
implemented for this?
Mhm.
Is that what?
No,
am I-
you're 100%. And
Yeah.
let's back out a
I
second.
don't want to try to.
Nah, go ahead, Shane. Go ahead.
Yeah, back out for a second, because something that all these things have in common, right? It's like a hypnotist show or like a Tony Robbins event or a sales pitch, whatever.
Right. With
There's
all the
there's like a
same-
close at the end. There's a close. Like how do we best prime people? How do we put them in the ideal state
Mhm.
so that they will buy what we're going to try to close them with?
Mhm.
Right.
Whether it's a
Right.
financial close or it's a spiritual close,
Hmm.
we're trying to close a deal. How
Hmm.
do we get people to buy what we're selling?
Hmm.
And there are some people who go, this is the formula, we know it, and we're just going to capitalize on it.
Hmm.
And there are some people that go, well, we know this
Hmm.
formula works, but we don't know why. Why would we, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they just perpetuate it. They don't know what the chord progressions are. They don't know why anyone would want a big keyboard pad in the background. But why do you need keyboards and a piano? Makes the sound bigger.
Hmm.
Why would you? I don't know
Hmm.
why you want a video screen. They just know it's effective. It's getting people to do what they want them to do, and they don't know why.
Yeah.
But
I feel like I didn't mean to derail your direction on that, Shane. I genuinely
this
just
trail
wanted
wasn't going anywhere.
No, I just genuinely, for my sake, I wanted to understand if, in general, there is this now entertainment driven that it's like you continuously need more of a buy-in, like you're gradually trying to get your consumer to buy in more and more and more and more, and maybe is that, I don't know. It just felt like that's kind of what you were driving at. Is that's the whole intent behind?
Well, I think
music,
the
is
point
that-
he's making that stands out to me is not necessarily a more and more and more, even though I think that's a part of it too. But
Sure.
the idea of this end thing that we're going to try to sell the person, like he said, we want you to give money and we want you to make a life commitment. Those are two big asks.
Right.
And for different people, sometimes the money is more of an ask. For sometimes it's the life commitment that's more of an ask. But
Right.
if I can just get you to buy in, how do I set the stage so that you're dropping your inhibition so that when I make those two asks, you're okay with that. Now, the more and more and more and more and more might just be, I need you to serve more. I need you to be here on Wednesday nights. I need you to be on it. Or the more and more and more and more and more could just be, I need you to live more holy. I need you to buy into that. That's part of the life commitment thing, though. So it's not always a dastardly, diabolical thing, so much as this is kind of how it works. But we also have to account for, there are people who get conversions without those things. You can witness to somebody on a bus and have
I
somebody
just
break
was
down in
trying to
tears.
understand if there was
Yeah.
a structure I was missing that was already like people knew, like we're trying to get more and more buy-in, like in it, like lower your inhibitions bit by bit, and that's we already know this is how. This is the process.
Yeah, I mean, there's two key moments.
I'm sure there's research and studies out there that can be used to make that argument.
Yeah, I just know if you want to take up the offering, it can't be the first thing. Like you go to a concert and they collect your money and then they let you in. You don't you want to give your money. So first you get everybody kind of acting the fool. And so once you drop those inhibitions, now, you're dancing, I'm dancing. Now it's not just a me and a you. Now there's a we. Now we have a group thing. Oh, you're reaching into your wallet. I don't want you guys to see me not reaching into my wallet.
And we've already been enjoying the production for the last half an hour. How are we going to stop enjoying it now? You know what I mean? Like they've already showed me the first 20 minutes of the movie. If I want to see the rest of this movie, I gotta, pay my little
gambler's fallacy.
Yeah,
it's exactly what con artists and hypnotists and magicians.
That's what I was saying earlier when you mentioned that. I'm like, yeah, that
I got you
fits.
this far.
Yeah.
I
got you this far.
Yeah, wow, that is so interesting.
And so
I'm so glad you brought this subject up, Ray. It's so cool. It's so cool to hear, and the tones that Shane is able to elicit, and the feelings.
with those tones and be able to layer them together and be able to implement why Ron Luce with the Choir of the Fire, threw in this thing and did this thing, and then why in church music, why this little thing made a difference and why it touches us. That is so cool.
And I feel like Shane is sitting right on the point he's trying to make. Go ahead, get that point out, because I want to wrap it up on this next one.
No, I mean, we're just kind of talking around, but if you go to a church service, usually where it's structured is the offering usually comes right at the tail end of the worship, right before it segues into the preaching. Everyone's just kind of, all right, good. All right, everyone, turn to your neighbor and say, I'm glad you're here. Go ahead, reach into your purse, your wallet. And I mean, you're on like an emotional high. And all right, I feel a little bit more giving than I do. And then the other thing is that's the money pitch. We're asking for your money. Then when we're asking for the big pitch at the end, that's when they have to bring the music back, because the preacher, he will deliver the message and he'll give some sort of benediction or whatever. He'll give the keyboard player a nod, and the guy says, so if we're just talking personally, and I said, all right, there's some of you guys that are probably watching this podcast live. You guys are going through something in your life. Maybe you were part of the church, whatever. And some of this is, that's notifications buzzing on my computer for some reason. Sorry about that. Some of you needed to hear this. Some of you were in a place where you were like struggling. We go, I felt something in there. Well, this is it. This is what we do. I mean, because I can go ahead and say the same thing and just be like, there's some people here tonight, and you're not sure why you. You're asking yourself, what am I doing here? I want you to know, God hears you. He knows where you're at, and he wants to meet you there. And so, I mean, it's the same as the Braveheart thing. I have slowed down the cadence. Now I'm doing like a theatrical. I'm saying the exact same words. I'm performing them now, and I'm giving that that musical thing. So in just a second, I'm going to ask you, I want you to just stand up right where you are. Every head bowed, every eye closed. Go ahead and stand up. All right. If you're standing, I want you to make your way down, and we're still playing. And it is just musical manipulation, and people are feeling something. And you go, that's because you don't know what music does. If you learn what it does, you're just playing people like a marionette.
Wow. So if you got questions, if you're in the chat, if you got questions, I've never done this before. I think we just opened it up today so that people can actually.
I'm not in a hurry.
All right, cool. I think we opened it up so that people can actually super chat a question. If there's anybody who's got questions for James, for Shane, and myself, you can super chat, or y'all let me know if the super chat is even actually working. I tried to set it up today. I think it is, but get your questions in. Super chat questions will actually get priority, but if the super chat is not working, you can just still type your question in the chat, because I'm still figuring out how all that works.
Yes.
I'm feeling a legit altar call. And I'm going to need a hand here, because as we sit here now, I am genuinely experiencing okay. All right. There are people, you know who you are. You're sitting there now and you're thinking, I have a question. And I understand how it feels. It's heavy. Sit down. Just send a super chat. It'll feel great when you ask that question. Just get it off your heart.
And then, all right.
Oh,
then
sure. Okay.
There's the key change. The key change.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
You can either take it up a second or you can take it up a third, depending on what.
And does the key change help people feel like Like, oh, I really ought to move now. Like, there's a progression that ought to catch up to, or like, what's the key change there?
If you see somebody that's like going back and forth between their pocket and they're not quite sure if they're going to pull it out and drop a 20 in the plate, that's like bringing in the closing manager for that timeshare thing. That keychain, that's how you close the deal.
Wow.
It does work. It
All right,
does
so
work.
look, I want to end it here. Then I'll open it up for questions in the chat.
Yes, sir.
I think that what happened in 2020 and 2021, when COVID hit and everything had to shut down, and even churches had to shut down, two things happened. At some point, I think pastors and church leaders realized this is bad for business. It's not just the spiritual people need to be here to, get their gospel and get all that. There's also if people are not coming here weekly to be musically manipulated, to become more suggestible by what we're doing and saying. I mean, think about what happens in the church service. The music gets you into the mindset of you're willing to accept the greatness and transcendence of God and the smallness and insignificance of you. And when you become susceptible, when your defenses are lowered, the messages, the suggestions that you begin to receive, what are they? They're telling you that you're loved. They're telling you that you have a Father in heaven, but they're also telling you how you've let that Father down, how you're unworthy, and how the Father really only loves you because he only loves you for Christ's sake. Like, he loves the Jesus in you. It's not the you, it's the you're receiving all these messages. Then a pandemic hits and you're not going to church on a regular basis anymore. If anything, you're going to church online, but it's not the same. You're not hearing those chords hit your soul like you did when you were in the sanctuary. You might be watching the church band play in an empty church building, but you're not feeling it the way that you were. And
the spirit can't manifest over Zoom.
The spirit can't come through the computer for months, for a year, for over a year. I think what happened during COVID is it's almost like it broke the spell off many people because they weren't there to have that experience.
I hadn't even thought about that.
After 10 months,
you remember that group?
Well, see, I was going through my deconversion before COVID hit.
See, me too. That's why I was asking.
Right. Yeah, but I know there are others who I have a good friend of mine who's a Christian rapper. He's deconverted, but not publicly yet. But he called me up when I publicly deconverted, talking about the things that he's been going through. And he says, this was 2022 when we spoke. He said, I realized toward the end of COVID, or toward the end of the lockdowns, he said, it felt like God was back where I left him before the shutdown. I spent the last year and a half not going to church and and this is not somebody who would have said, oh, I had a church. This is somebody who I was born again. I was walking with God. But he realized not being in that building, not being around those people who were confirming his belief, not having the worship service, and just the him and God time alone. After a couple of months on end, he said, man, it seems like I've still been praying. I've still been reading my Bible. But it feels like God is back where I left him before all this shut down. I just say that to say, I think there are very many people who they realized that without the trappings, without the worship service, without the suggestibility of being in that setting,
right?
It's almost like they had to think for themselves for the first time in years. And it's like the spell had been broken. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, or if you've even seen that maybe with certain people.
Well, it seems like there's a corollary, which is like the professional workplace where people got so used to, working from home, things open back up and they're like, I just discovered a whole new world. I'm not going back. And if you tell me I got to, then I quit.
Right.
There would have to be something similar going on. Like I'm curious to see what percentage of the church population backslid and then didn't go get revived. They slid out and didn't try to slide back in because they're like, hold on, wait. Yeah, the first 30 days took some getting used to. The first 60 days sucked, and then once we kind of get settled down and like recalibrate like what life could be like, the work-life balance.
Yeah.
Just being sort of content and not like waking up every day and just hating life. I've got to get up 2 hours early and spend an hour in traffic and just, life can be different. I can have, I've heard this joy that other people talk about. You mean it's not, that's available to me through this other avenue here. I wonder what not having that church experience for a couple years did for people. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's people that just missed it so much and they ran straight back, but I wonder for other people, how much it just made like kind of take stock of what were we doing there? Why did we put so much importance on showing up at this day and that time? Why are we driving and spending gas money to go see a guy that's supposed to be everywhere?
Yeah. And there's some people who I'm sure they continue to have their daily experiences of God at home. And so maybe I don't necessarily need to keep going back. Then there are others who it sort of did kind of hit them. Like you said, it's a little odd that I'm going to a place to spend time with an omnipresent being. Something's off here. And I really do think to some degree, there's a sense in which without that daily or weekly dose of the service, you almost get to see some of the, maybe I should say what I'm thinking. You kind of see it for the facade that it is. You kind of see that if it takes all that, then maybe it's not the thing that I was calling it all this time.
Because there's no Holy Spirit room service. You can't order that.
Well, depending on your tradition, some people would say, "Oh, I've got that." James, what are you thinking? Seems like you're conflicted there.
I'm struggling. I'm a bit conflicted because I'm struggling with the notion that I have the luxury of traveling to Jamaica just post pandemic. Had to get like the nasal swabs in order to fly before you left the country, before you come back in, like it does. And what I noticed was the impact of the Christian faith on the Jamaicans is lingering. It has become part of the culture.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how much church you take away. And I am speaking from a place of privilege. I do have a best friend who's Jamaican, Bello. And, we just kind of investigated that culture while I was there because that's what type of nerd I am. And I just couldn't find any mitigation in the faith, the belief, the constant adulation to a creator, a God, a deity. That seemed to be it's become ingrained in the culture and socially though too.
Right.
So if you're not, even if you're not gathering daily, you're still saying the same things. You're still agreeing to the same, like you're still.
I think part of that too though is the socio-economic reality of a lot of people in Jamaica.
That could be absolutely.
Like, think about
I was
here,
just considering, what you were talking about the pandemic. And I think it may be an American or North American phenomenon.
For sure. Yeah.
I just started thinking about it.
Yeah, you're going to cling to God and to your religion and to your tradition and your rituals. You're going to cling to that a lot more if your socioeconomic condition, is dire.
Right. Potentially. Because there are atheists in foxholes, so potentially yes.
They fare quite well.
Yeah. All right, let's get
And
to
I'm not trying
questions.
to
Guys,
sidestep your point.
no. You're right. I mean, we can't say too much emphatically without being able to consider
I think what
there's
you were
exceptions to
talking
rules,
about,
and we haven't even proven that these are rules.
but I think what you were talking about is interesting and about the impact that it
Mm.
could have had on the North American culture for, churches that, we all met every
Mhm.
week, and it just became part of the culture. And then, yeah, I just wanted to juxtapose it with what I
Yeah.
experienced in
Nope.
another
All good.
country.
All good. Yep.
But I do think you have a point about our American culture, and
Yeah.
it definitely could have had
Sure.
an impact for sure, because if you don't have that influence week to week, I definitely think
Mhm.
it could affect your echo chamber for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could even see people wanting to rush back to it because they could see almost like the effects of it wearing off.
Yeah, that's kind
But
of a
let's get to these
negative thing, right?
questions. If they're, yeah, if you guys have questions, like I said, try to super chat. I see one super chat. We're going to read the super chats first. Questions for Shane, for James, or myself, and then we're going to wrap it up. I think the first super chat I see, I'm looking for from that marketing team. That is Ty. She asked a question of James. What did you think when you realized that none of that miracle stuff was God? What did that do to your identity and belief? And James said early on he was actually participating in faith healings. He was doing those things before he left the faith. So Ty asks, that marketing team asks, what did you think when you realized that none of that was God? What did it do to your identity and belief? Well, let me ask this question to help her question. Did you leave the faith before you stopped doing those things, or were you doing those things up until you left the faith? Is that clear? Am I asking that right?
Yes, you are. I'd abandoned the practice of faith healing probably 8 years prior to my deconstruction.
Okay.
So I had problems with that first.
Okay.
And had decided that was either I wasn't called or equipped or whatever it was. I had disillusioned myself enough to step away from that aspect, but had not abandoned my faith. So I really, I think I compartmentalized them and separated them and didn't think about them as shamelessly as I have to admit that. I think I have to admit that. I spent about a decade disassociated from what I had done in my early 20s, and just kind of put it on a shelf and just said, I don't understand what was going on there, but I'm not doing that anymore. That's the best way I can answer.
So it didn't make you think less of God. It didn't make you think less of yourself as a believer.
It
or differently
may
of
have
God,
made
or differently of
me
yourself as a
think.
believer.
Yes, I think that's probably what happened, is that I just kind of felt less about myself. That I have gotten something wrong, and that's okay. And
Because other people were able to do it, but you weren't.
God should be able to do it.
Oh, okay, got you.
That's what I've been taught. If we are who we are being taught we are, God should be able to do it. And so far,
he missed the bus.
Gotcha.
Or I did.
All right.
And that was where
I'm still looking for questions
I
in the
landed on.
Hey, if we're all standing at the bus stop together, more the merrier.
That was a 2-part question, though, right? Like, I think I answered the first part. I don't think I answered the second.
Let me go back to it. What did you think when you realized
you
that
got
none
a
of that miracle
Jamaican
stuff
up
was
in the
God? What
chats
did you?
too? Wagwan.
What did that do to your identity
Medeo.
and belief? I think you answered it.
What's that now?
Looking for
All
other
right, cool.
questions.
Oh
If
no.
there are no
Is it
other
going to be a short
questions,
night because we
we are
don't have?
going to probably.
Oh no.
I see a
I'm
lot of
not
good jokes
interesting
in the
enough.
chat. Good point.
Oh no, we don't
I
have
don't.
anybody.
Oh, I think I see a question. Here we go.
Okay.
Question from Brooklyn Lewis Skeptic. Question for all of you. When you realize you built your life on something that may not be true, what emotions did you experience? You all were professional Christians, and it must have been odd.
Great question.
I
Yeah,
will
really
default
good
to you,
question. What
Jim, and
emotions
I'll.
did you experience? Yeah. I can go. The emotions that I experienced, it was first fear, because if this is not true, what is? Embarrassment. I had gone around the world telling people these things were true and they're not. Probably a little shame and pity for myself for having fallen for this. Maybe some anger as I sought out Christian. I sought Christians to help me make sense of it all, but I just got the sense that they were lying to me, or at least they were bending over backwards to get me to still believe what I knew could not be true. So anger. Um, and then finally, maybe these are like the 5 stages of my grief, because finally, after all that, it was acceptance and relief. I felt a huge relief that I no longer had around trying to make sense of that which was nonsense. So that's the gambit of emotions I went through.
Anger was close to the top. For me, though, it was frustration more than anything else, because when there wasn't one thing that did it for any of us. It was a number of things that coalesced. And at so many points, at each thing that all added up to the big thing, I'd reach out to people and I'd ask them, and they would either get too scared to deal with it, or they'd get too like disgusted that somebody was even being questioned. And this is like this, when you experience a life change this much, like when you grow up with people, you spend years and years with them. You don't, I mean, changing your religion, that's like worse than changing your sports team allegiance. If you just wake up one day and you're not a Yankees fan, you're a Red Sox fan, that's an interesting story. Like, yo, how did that happen? And there were overwhelming response was they were more interested in that the new position had been taken than how it came about. And there was just such a reluctance to ask questions. Like, not what are you dealing? Like, what are you going through? What happened? How, like, let's talk through it. I'm curious. I'm not worried about you trying to sell me on your new atheism. I like what's going on. That's a big freaking thing. Nobody did that. They just backed up. I mean, it was almost like you had spiritual leprosy.
Wow. James?
I need to hear the question one more time. I kind of got caught up in your answers.
No, it's all good. When you realize you built your life on something that may not be true, what emotions did you experience? You all were professional Christians, and it must have been odd.
I was not a professional Christian at the time I deconstructed. However, I desperately think I flailed for a foundation. Like I flailed for then now what? That my
I think I did it even before I fully deconstructed. As I started looking for grounding, like what do you ground yourself in? I happened upon philosophy, epistemology, existentialism, things like that. I found a grounding there first, and I think that might have been the only saving grace that I found, was that I found a grounding in epistemology, the logical absolutes, law of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. They seem to be reliable, trustworthy, good enough. And since this thing that I had been relying on my entire life for everything, my sustenance, everything, which consistently, reliably failed me, like over and over. So replacing it with the logical.
I'm trying to figure out what the chord progression for the law of non-contradiction. Sorry about that.
So replacing it with the logical absolutes, which we all three, I'm sure, know are not absolute. However, mathematically, they seem to be non-contradictory. The law of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, they're reliably true. They seem to be something that I can't get around. I've tried mathematically just to see and poke holes in this new foundation. I mess with that, and I still do. You know, the liar's paradox, or whatever. This sentence is true. Mathematically, it doesn't align with the three laws, and so you can mess with that all day. I found those to be a new foundation that I could latch onto, and at least for my existence on this plane of reality, that seems to be good enough. And the other one wasn't, and it was failing me. It was falling apart. It wasn't. So I looked for a life raft.
Yeah, that's good.
That's what I found. I latched onto it, and I haven't let go, and I guess that's where I am.
Yeah, until it fails you, right?
Better answer.
No, that's great.
I'm embarrassed.
That's
I
great.
don't have a better answer.
No, you don't need a better answer. That's as real as it gets. I mean, and I think that's what anybody could ask for. One or two more questions here from EAE. Question: did realizing you weren't going to see loved ones again after death affect you in any way? Shane?
I got a lag here. Are you guys lagging too?
Oh, Brady, why don't you answer that then?
Okay.
And I'll go.
Connection problem.
No worries, bro. We got you.
Yep. I'll dive in until Shane is ready. So for me, it did affect me, but not in a, like, it never depressed me. It never, like, I know one thing's for certain. If it is the case that there is no afterlife, I won't be around to care about not seeing anyone, because, just like before I was born, I didn't care about things then. When I die, likely will be the same state of affairs. But in terms of while I have people in this life, what it did was it affected my the way that I view how I deal with people in this life, as opposed to thinking, oh, I have forever to hang out with that person. No, as far as I know, this is all I have. And so, it affected me by making me want to seize these moments, as opposed to, hey, I'll spend the first 3 million years of forever with so-and-so. No, I won't get that time. Better see him now.
I love this. I love this question. And the reason is it was because it was thinking about this before the deconversion that kind of lent itself to it, because what I got hung up on a while thinking about was, what about all those loved ones? Because we're not going to see all our loved ones up there. Right. There's some loved ones that never made the commitment. They never made, gave their lives to Jesus or whatever. how do you enjoy heaven the way
Mm.
it's intended for you with the knowledge that some of
Mhm.
your loved ones are suffering forever? Even if you're not
Mm.
going through the experience with them, just knowing that, how do
Mhm.
you go through all of eternity being aware that a loved one is undergoing the worst imaginable torture? And so
Mm.
that was like one of the things I was like, well, heaven doesn't sound like what? So they're gonna
Mm.
like erase my memory?
Mm.
So, like, am I gonna like if you get to heaven, are you gonna just like have no knowledge? Is it gonna be like a um total recall kind of thing where like your identity is stripped away and reprogrammed? Like, well, then if you do that, then how are
Are
you
you
getting
you?
rewarded? Because the
Yeah. Oh,
person who
yeah.
made the sacrifice in order to get the reward
Mm.
is not even cognizant that they got the reward. It's like a different identity now. And like just dwelling on the whole thing, I was like, you know what? It doesn't.
Mm.
I was like, so much of the religion is just fear of, I want to live forever. I want an
Mm.
everlasting life. What's the magical elixir? Well, if you can't do it on earth, then we do it in the afterlife. I'm like, you know what? I don't think I want to do the whole afterlife thing. Like everyone comes
Mm.
up and goes like, are you sure, where are you going to go when you die? I'm like, can we just opt out? Is that an option? Just be like, let's not even worry about the judging. Left was
Mm.
left, right. Doesn't matter. I'm just like, I'm good. I'm gonna go to sleep. Don't anyone
Mm.
bug me. Don't wake me up. That's comfortable than having the simultaneous bliss of being there and also just the psychological torture of knowing where your loved ones are. Some of them.
Mm. James?
So growing up, the idea of heaven just confounded me to the point to where I just relied on God will figure it out. This whole
Mm.
thing doesn't make any sense to me. Um, it seemed ludicrous to me from the time I can remember, which is why I think I just accepted that heaven was going to be awesome. It's just going to
Mm.
be so fucking great. It's going to
Mm.
be the coolest. So don't worry about it, bro. And I think the first time it occurred to me
Mm.
that I'm going to die and that's going to be it, I was sitting in a bathtub. I'm not sure if I had deconstructed yet, but I was listening to the Enchiridion by Epictetus. And there was a portion where he discussed the fact that there was a period that he never existed before he was born.
Mm.
And he's not sure how long that was, but it doesn't bother him at all that he wasn't alive during that time period.
Mm.
And I sat with that. And I maybe sat with
Hmm.
that for like 10 minutes. And I just stared at this like little, you guys have done this where you find a reflection on an object, like a metallic reflection, like whether it be a light bulb or whatever, but you focus in on that and you just zone in while you reflect on a thought.
Hmm.
And it was that moment whenever I realized, oh, you weren't alive for a whole long time, bro. And you haven't thought about that at all. It hasn't hurt your feelings. You didn't cry. Up till this moment, you didn't even think about the fact about all those years you missed. All those years where awesome shit was going on and amazing people existed. And you missed it all. You just weren't there. You gonna cry about it when you're not there later?
Are you going to feel different? Yeah.
And to me, it just didn't make sense to mourn anymore.
Hmm.
That was for me. That
Yeah.
was a moment for me. And I just
Gotcha.
thought, oh, okay, right. Sure.
Wow.
We're here for a bit and then we cease.
Yeah.
Okay. But we
Yeah.
weren't here a lot longer. And we won't be here a hell of a lot longer.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I don't know why, but it was soothing for me. So it was almost like, you know what? But you do get this.
Right. Yeah. It makes you
Like
focus on the now.
you don't get what you didn't get before you were born, and you're
Mhm.
not going to get anything after you're dead, no matter how much you love those people. But you know what? You do get this moment right now.
Ah,
You can be here.
yeah.
Uh-oh, we
Shane lost the
Shane.
connection. Yeah, he just
Uh-oh.
texted me. He lost the connection. We'll see if we'll get him back in. Let's jump to. Oh, here he is. He's back in. Let's.
I don't know why that mattered
Mhm.
or why it changed everything about the way that I thought
Yeah.
about my loved ones and that I would never get to see again. But for whatever
Yeah.
reason, it was soothing, and that for
Yeah.
me was okay. I
Yeah.
just in that moment immediately it was all the anxiety associated with death was gone.
I get it.
So yeah,
I get it. Let's do one or two more, guys, since we're past 2.5 here. That marketing team has a good question, James. I'd like you to try to see if you can
sure.
give us something on this one, and we'll see if we can add
I'll take a
anything.
crack.
That marketing team asked, is speaking in tongues a response to hypnotic prompts?
I don't think so. I think speaking in tongues is a pretty well documented phenomenon.
Mhm.
It might be closely associated. I don't think it requires much. Honestly, I could do it right now. It's not impressive. It's a learned behavior. It's
Mhm.
easier to do if you've seen it
Mhm.
from a young age.
Yeah.
So the younger age you've seen it, the easier it is to replicate. And it's babbling. Honestly, it's so simple.
Mhm.
Making it seem like it's something interesting, unique, like that doesn't take much work. It's really the more types of languages you've heard that diversifies your scope of your
Your spiritual vocabulary?
speaking in tongues. Yeah, like the more dialects you've heard, like if you've never heard like African languages where it's like clicks and like instead of like you're rolling your R's in Spanish. If you've never heard those languages, you're not going to be able to exhibit those in tongues. Right? But if you've heard those languages and a diversity of them, it makes it seem so much more like, flowery but it's really, there's no difference from that. And you go and just putting yourself like, I'm going to relax for a second and go, like there's not a whole lot of difference. That they're just super closely related.
Yeah. All right. I'm not going to even try to tackle that one. I have my own thoughts about speaking in tongues.
Oh, sorry.
No, when I was
that
early
wasn't convincing speaking in tongues. I was doing that on purpose to
right,
try
we
to
got you.
mitigate it.
We got you.
You were like 80% there.
Well, when I was early on in my spiritual development, as it were, in a Pentecostal kind of church, I remember doing my version of speaking in tongues, and in my mind the entire time, I was choosing the syllables that I was saying.
You knew,
and I knew, but I was hoping that God would like pick up and kind of get involved.
It's more like relaxing yourself. It honestly, it's much more simple than you think. It's so much more like just allowing yourself to babble incoherently and being okay with that. It'd almost be like for you allowing yourself to just like clap like that to self-soothe incoherently. Just because you
spiritual stemming.
It is. It's I would equate it to spiritual stemming so much, having been diagnosed as neurodivergent. I legitimately think speaking in tongues can be reduced to that so easily.
But to the question,
I think it's a thing we do.
But to the question that was asked, though, is there nothing like synonymous there in terms of the way you talked about hypnosis, you have people who are around you who are bidding you to do certain things. There's a trust factor. There's a I've already bought into much of this experience already. Do none of those kind of carry over to the person who I've never spoken tongues before, but I'm going to do it now at your bidding? Is there not something there?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in that regard, I mean, I think we're definitely talking about social conditioning,
Mhm.
the influence of peer pressure, all of those things
Mhm.
being influential on that person demonstrating that gift of speaking in
Gotcha.
tongues. I think fully sure we could put that in the realm, but I think that honestly, I think that's more. I'll, of course, it's in the vein of everything we've been talking about, but I think you could reduce that down to psychological conditioning, um, like peer pressure, things like that. I think more so, but whenever so given the dynamic that we're talking about, Pentecostal charismatic stuff, I do think that the tactics and techniques that are used to get somebody
Mhm.
to pray in tongues and things like that do
Yeah.
utilize the same strategies that a hypnotist would. Absolutely. So.
All right. This is going to be our last question here. I don't see any more super chats. And I'm going to read this last question here. This is from Ezra Kane. Question: Aaron Janis mentioned Jesus represented the archetype of the ultimate compassionate human being. Did this imagery of the Jesus character or persona influence your emotional heartstrings?
Wow.
At what point? Early on or after the deconversion process?
Let's just, for the sake of time, let's just say, Ezra, if I butcher your question, forgive me. I think it's a more interesting question because I think any Christian would say yes.
I think it's an
The
awesome
character of
question.
Jesus.
Yeah.
The character of Jesus was, pulled on our heartstrings as Christians. Any Christian should say yes to that. So to make it more interesting, let's just say Ezra's question is, now, having deconverted, does this idea of Jesus representing the archetype of the ultimate compassionate human being, does that pull on your non-Christian heartstrings?
Yes. I love to look at people's faces when I tell them I'm a Christian and an atheist, because that doesn't compute. And the reason I find a lot of great examples in Jesus's character, the way he handled other people, the things that he prioritized, the instructions he gave, especially coming, with his Jewish background in, the Mosaic law, and how he just kind of, his message on how to treat your fellow man, just giving people a new way of doing things, the unconditional love. I don't care if you believe that the story is true. It doesn't matter, to me. Like the whole, the myth, was it historical, is it mythical, is it some combination? It's like, who cares? I can take, we can watch a movie and see an admirable character and go, that person's got a thing. If they were real, I would follow them. Whether they're real or not, that's a quality or a characteristic that I can emulate. I think so many of us did that with Rocky when we were little. For me, I started doing sit-ups because I wanted Rocky's abs. And I do, my granddad would say your prayers and do your sit-ups. He didn't have to be real. It doesn't matter that they're not real, but what it did for me, it's still a great beacon to aspire to, but it's also so disappointing how many of his followers act in ways that are so counter to the example he set and the message he spread. It's like, we believed he existed and died so we can be jerks for Jesus. And you're like, man, you guys totally missed the message. If
Hmm.
you lost the whole plot. So yeah, I find a lot of beauty in it. I find a lot of inspiration in it, and it makes me even more exasperated with the people who actually believe it because they don't generally do nearly as they don't follow the example he was trying to set. So that's frustrating.
Okay. All right. James, the character of Jesus, does he still pull on your heartstrings?
I would say absolutely yes. I
Hmm.
am a student of Stoic philosophy. I have a tendency to I would like to express my admonition for the Stoics, the archetypes,
Hmm.
the ideologies that we should all aspire to, the greatness. I don't find the Christ figure to be impressive post research. So
Mm-hmm.
I find much more beauty in the Stoics and things of that nature than I ever found in the Messiah. I get it. I get it. I
Yeah.
get the archetype. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, now that I've considered it, I would like to abandon the Jewish carpenter and that fable and aspire to greater ideals. And I don't find it as flattering or impressive as I used to.
Yeah.
In fact, I find it a bit lackluster and ho hum in hindsight. I know it's
Wow.
affected me. I know it's affected me, and I know it influences our culture and our society. And in that regard, I have to just say yes, it is a part of of us, and to deny it would be
Yeah.
frivolous and stupid in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I now find it to be less than.
Yeah.
So,
I won't say much. I'll just say I would echo James. I thought I was going to be the odd man out because I was going to say, uh, no, I don't find the character of Jesus to be this ultimate figure that pulls on my heartstrings. I could watch a great movie, and the villain in the movie could say something that I want to go tweet, like, "Yo, that was
yeah.
banging," and
Yo,
I'd say
yeah.
the same thing
Yeah.
about Jesus. Uh,
Okay, so
like,
yeah, I align in that way too. Yeah.
yeah, like but so the
I
way the
can't
disciples,
remember
not,
one dope thing he said right now. But
well, here's the thing though. Some of the things that he said you could find in the mouths of other people. So
right.
Hillel, the elder, right? Hillel the
Right.
elder would say some of the very things that the gospel writers would put in Jesus's mouth. So it's like, okay, is he really? What did they say? Never a man spoke like this. No, people spoke like that.
Oh, lots
Um,
of people. I mean, you go over to the Far East, and that's like like
right.
what he came back, and he
Yeah.
disappeared from like age of 8 to 30, and he came back espousing like Hinduism ideas. So I find it beautiful, but I don't find it unique at all. Like he wasn't
Right.
Yeah.
he wasn't saying
Yeah.
anything that other people weren't saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And to be honest, when I think about the way his story is cobbled together, when you're pulling in things from other heroes of the day, other mythical or uh, maybe they were real, but they were mythologized after their death. Other heroes of the day, you're pulling things from their story and putting them in Jesus's story. It's hard for someone with that kind of historical record to pull on my heartstrings. So I'd rather take the sayings of Jesus that may hold some weight as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to latch on to the person of Jesus. I can't do that. Um, we have one more super chat that came in. JB asked, does Yahweh Yahweh of the Old Testament pull on your heartstrings?
Not
I,
in any way, shape, or form.
I actually have some strong feelings about
Yeah, I've
the
got very.
Old Testament Yahweh, and he does pull on my heartstrings here,
Does he?
he or she,
In what
whoever
way?
she may be.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I've found it to be contradictory, morally vapid, if not entirely anthropomorphically unjust and just vitriolic.
Well, that doesn't sound like it pulls
and
on your heartstrings. That sounds like it
it's
it pulls on your nerves.
I think that's what I associate with heartstrings. Like,
Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that
But Yahweh doesn't. Okay.
He unnerves me. It unnerves me. The concept,
Yeah.
the idea, it unnerves me. Yeah.
Shane, do you
That's
feel
my
about
key.
Yahweh the way that you feel about Jesus?
Not in the least. I used to
Okay.
make a joke that if you were to pose for Final Jeopardy, the final question is, which character from history is best known for his pettiness, obsession with violence, contradictory behavior, and weird fixation on Jews and killing them? You could buzz in and say either God or Hitler, and you would be right. And that that kind of like shows you where I lump in Yahweh.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I have I'm still so new to deconversion that I have a hard time not having an emotional reaction. So I almost can identify with James, where it does pull on my heartstrings, but in a kind of a violent way. I hope to be able to get to the point where I have no emotional reaction after a while. But right now, my emotions are kind of high, more for Yahweh than for Jesus, because Jesus is written in such a palatable way to an extent. He's still telling people that if you don't, hate mother and father, you're not worthy to be his disciple. So even Jesus,
like that one.
yeah, even Jesus has some sayings I wouldn't want to hang my hat on. But with Yahweh, there's a whole other issue. So yeah. Hopefully this was good. I saw a lot of comments in the chat. People were vibing and rocking with the things you guys had to say. I appreciate you all's time and your hearts and your minds to just be able to look at these things. What I like to do on my channel is look back at my former faith to kind of see, if I had my eyes open sooner, what would I have seen? What would I have saw that would have caused me to say, oh, this can't be true? And I think, all the episodes on my channel is me looking back, but maybe it's helping somebody else look forward, because they're going to begin traveling this same road of deconversion. So I appreciate you guys. Any last words?
Help somebody's kid someday, man. One of our kids.
Hey. Yeah.
Yeah. I've
Any last words from either?
Yeah, I do. I got one.
Yeah.
I know, Brady, your audience is primarily not the still believing sort. So this message is to especially pastors that probably just reject our entire position in everything we said. What I would like to encourage you guys to do is try a little experiment, because you guys are selling something. Now, if you think we're wrong about what we said, that you're getting people to buy because you're using language that programs them, you're using a structured couple-hour ceremony that primes them just right. If you believe in your message, believe in it like somebody selling Girl Scout cookies. Because when you want somebody to buy s'mores, you bang on their door. Hey, you want to buy some s'mores? Yeah. How many boxes you got? It's an easy sell because they want it. Go ahead, open up your church and restructure it. Like, take all the elements that you do in there, just move them around. Collect the offering right up front. It's the cover charge to get inside. Do the altar call first. Have the worship without any music and save it for the end. Just mix the whole thing up and see what See how many souls, see what the ratio is compared to the weekly average. When you don't implement music, when you don't use the light show, when things are unstructured, and see if that has any effect on whether or not the presence shows up.
Yo, I just want to share with you guys. Trying to get it on the screen right now. Let me
Did I lose Brady?
what's that?
Brady's frozen.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Can you see me? Hear me?
Yeah, we got you. You cut out for a minute.
It's not gonna.
Oh
let me do
yeah.
it. Okay. Can you see?
Oh, look
Can
at
you-
this.
You see Shane's book?
I bought that
Oh, there
book.
it is. I
bought that
trying to
book,
get
the
Shane's book.
paperback, of course.
Yeah, there we go. Well, see,
I bought that. I grabbed that
yeah,
paperback
Conspiracy
earlier.
Christianity. Yeah, check it out on Amazon. Conspiracy Christianity by Shane Almgren. It is a great book where he walks through just why, particularly evangelical Christians, are so susceptible to conspiracy theories. So check that out when you get a chance. And if you haven't liked or subscribed to this channel, Ichabod on YouTube, please subscribe and look forward to more content from me and my deconverted buddies. People, what's up?
Awesome.
I love that. I didn't have to pay for
That
that
was
marketing
great.
plug. Yeah.
Highly
I know, right?
Hey, but I'll let you guys go in the chat. Thank you all for rocking with us. Y'all have a great night, and I'll be back next time. Till then, much love, y'all.
Peace.
Appreciate
You
you.
guys.
Do we stay in the? Are we staying?